Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Set 6. And today, what we've got for you is the next episode of the massive hit series on the channel, The Big Seven. Now, this week's guest, I'm sure, doesn't really need much of an introduction, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the almighty Mo Gallagher to introduce himself. So, if you'd like to tell everyone what it is that you do and where they can find you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you for
This
coming.
this has been this has been one of my go-to shows for a couple of months now. I've listened to every single episode. They were all amazing, so I'm delighted to be part of it. But as John said, I'm Mo Gallagher, or better known by my author name M.J Gallagher, on social media and around. I am probably best known at the moment for being the author of uh, a couple of books from the Final Fantasy VII sort of community. The most recent of which is called Norse Myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, which is what it says on the tin. You know, it's just an exploration of the Norse mythology that influenced certain decisions, or that kind of filters into the original Final Fantasy VII and the compilation and parts of the remake. And I think it was good to start with Norse mythology. There's a kind of little story with Najima and Najima's interest in Norse mythology. So I think Final Fantasy VII is quite unique, and kind of picking up the book will explain why. So that the Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII kind of came off the back of a few years where I'd written a couple of fan fiction novels. Fan fiction has kind of been my area of familiarity for about 10 years now, where, you know, I'm a bit of a sort of weird case where I went to university to study mathematics and decided just to become a writer. And
I can't imagine university level mathematics. Like my brain starts wanting to melt out of my ear the moment I think about it.
Yeah, it gets to the point where you're just not even using numbers anymore. It's just letters everywhere. Maybe that's why I became a writer.
Possibly.
But I sort of decided, you know, one day that I was going to, just for my own enjoyment, retell Final Fantasy VII in a fan fiction novel. And it got a bit of traction online, and one thing led to another, and I ended up sort of producing a couple of volumes just to sort of give away to people, because you know, obviously there's copyright infringement, and it was just a bit of fun anyway. And it got picked up by KupoCon, who sort of gave a couple of the books away just as VIP gifts to people. So it was nice to be able to go down and do some book signings, and that sort of led on to a standalone book called The Nibelheim Incident, which I personally wrote, but it contains chapter artwork by the community artist Crimson Sun, who I've been an admirer of since time began, I think. And also AJ Haitley of Game Tea Limited did the cover. So, you know, it was great to be able to collaborate with people who I've admired for years. It was presented by KupoCon. It was, you know, pretty well received, to the point where they commissioned an audiobook, which is read by Liam Mulvey, who's Libertus from Final Fantasy 15.
Which is a good guy. That's a good guy.
So Liam's a smashing guy. Yeah, so he and I have become pretty good friends over the last few years. And, you know, off the back of that, I co-authored a Final Fantasy VIII novel, and it kind of got to the point where, you know, I kind of thought, you know what, this seems to be going somewhere. I'm just going to take the chance and try and stick something out there that is fresh and original, and, you know, for all intents and purposes, you know, there can make a little bit of money off it.
Yeah, it can be monetized.
So
it's a lot of time that you put into things like this. Do you know what I mean? And that time doesn't come from nowhere.
Well, that's it. You know, and it was always great to be able to do it for fun. And the thing that actually changed for me was starting a family, because it was more difficult then to justify at the time. So it got to the point where, you know, I love doing what I'm doing. I've for a variety of reasons, I also have a fascination with global mythology, and
Yes.
I'd started writing some blogs about the mythology that appears in the various Final Fantasy games. And one day it was just like one of those light bulb moments. It was just like, do you know what? I've
I'm
actually
going to
got
put
enough
one in on the
content
video
here.
now.
I've got enough content here to actually just put a book together. So that's what I did, and here we are, a year down the line, and I've just launched a Kickstarter for the follow-up, which is Greek myths
Which
that
did
inspired Final Fantasy VII.
phenomenally well. I was
Thank you.
amazed watching that Kickstarter just go from 0 to done.
I know that was pretty
Crazy.
crazy,
It must
pretty
be good for
crazy.
you as well, though, because it must kind of validate a lot of the work that you put into these things.
It definitely does,
Yeah.
and I think like most, I don't know if you experience this. A lot of other creators that I encounter, I think quite a lot of us have imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
where we just, it's you never really feel good enough. You always feel
Should
as
I
if
be
you're
doing
just
this?
like
Yeah.
a total fraud, and amongst everyone else, and you're hoping not to get caught.
Yep.
Um,
Been there.
so yeah, you're right. It was one of those things that it was pretty validating, and the manner in which it happened, I was fairly confident that we would meet the goal within 30 days, but to smash it by like 500% in the first 24 hours was like,
Crazy.
yeah, okay, yeah, that was pretty special. So even now, I'm still a bit overwhelmed that
Yeah.
that happened, but so I'm delighted, and it means that I can kind of plough forward, knowing that I've got the support of the community. So yeah, and if anyone's interested in what I do, most of my stuff's actually available just for free, or I host it on Patreon, so it's just patreon.com/MJ Gallagher. Or you can find me on Twitter at FFVII Novels.
And we will get all the links in the description, and you'll see them floating just underneath Mo's picture right now, so get on it.
Thank you. And and the Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII is just available on Amazon. So it's all the links are they're on Patreon. It's very easy to find. I'm again, as I said, I'm just delighted to be here and amongst such fantastic company as your previous videos.
No, brilliant. I mean, this is what the aim of the series is, because a lot of people, it's nice to get to know the creators, that you're watching the videos, you're reading the books in your instance. Do you know what I mean? You kind of, you're spending your time, people are spending their time watching us, so it's good to have like a little chat every now and again as well. And plus, we're in a bit of a lull at the minute as far as Final Fantasy VII Remake stuff goes. I mean, all we really got at the minute now is just waiting for it to drop on PC, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair, Traces of Two Pasts came
That
out recently.
I'm still waiting on a Tifa translation. I've done the Aerith one.
So I'm halfway through. I've read the first half of the Tifa one. I actually have the book, but haven't had the time to sit and try and translate.
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said I knew a word of Japanese, but I have one of those sort of Google translator devices where you kind of have to know the context of the story for it to make sense.
Yeah, because it's kind of
It's-
broken a bit, isn't it, when it translates like that?
So it's interesting, and I do enjoy it, and I think some of the content that I've put out shows that I like to delve into
Yes.
ridiculous
The law
depths.
videos, yeah.
So I mean, it's good when you're kind of talking about there's not a huge amount to go on, because I'm still trying to finish my Final Fantasy VII Remake video series. For me, there's still plenty
Still
to
going
to
through,
come.
yeah.
So I feel as if I'm kind of trying to play catch up while everyone else is looking
No,
at
but
their
you're
watch.
going quite granular with it, do you know what I mean? Whereas, like with me, it's always been kind of a problem. I don't know if it's a problem or not, but I kind of gone straight for the fact of the matter. Like I'll be like, right, I assume that people know the things that I know to a certain degree, and I kind of need to do that less. Whereas with you, it's just completely granular, and you're just going through every single detail. And yeah, it takes a long time. It takes a long time.
So it's nice. I think as I don't think I could describe myself any better than just a storyteller, but
Yeah.
like a rambling storyteller.
That's kind.
So that's kind of why I think the videos work. That it's just
Yeah,
me. I've so much to say about minuscule details that yeah, here you go. Like you either enjoy them or you don't enjoy them, but I'll keep making them.
here's
So
a 3 hour video on a 20-minute section of the game.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
No, and it's really good. It's like people like VII and people like Sleep Easy as well. You kind of all go to that massive level of detail, and without guys like you going to that level of detail, you know what I mean, there'd just be a massive gap in the community. You know what I mean? So I appreciate it because there's a
Well,
lot of times where I find myself watching these videos and being like, oh, I didn't know that. So, and then that informs one of my videos. So it's good. It's a big circle of law.
thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I think I totally agree with you. I love everything that Sleep Easy does. I love everything that Visivizad does, and
Hey, you said it.
yeah, I've been practicing all day.
You've cocked it up
Um,
one less time than me.
um, and I think one of the things, like between the three of us, and we've all discussed it together, you know, that because we approach it from different angles,
Yep,
like mine is the sort of minuscule detail of what's gone before,
yep,
and Visivizad does the minuscule detail of what's about to come, and Sleep Easy looks at the really big picture.
yeah. What's coming, where it could all
Um,
lead to, that sort of thing. Yeah,
so it's, I mean, having people like that going into a mad level of deep detail in a way that you know my particular brain doesn't work like that. I
yeah,
don't always look at the big picture. So it's I find it endlessly fascinating and quite frankly, and I'm sure most people in the community will say the same thing. Just having so many content creators during the pandemic, just sticking out, you know, video after video after video is kept us all sane. I think
yeah. To a
so.
certain degree.
So it's nice to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the big things that kind of motivated me to actually start doing it because it's like, well, I'm sat at home working. I'm not traveling to work. I'm not coming home from work. Even when I am working, I'm not really working, let's be fair. So I've got the time to, you know, be able to start doing this sort of stuff. So I'm kind of grateful to it to a certain degree, but that feels weird to say. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, definitely. I'm the same. I'm one of the few people I think that's actually benefited overall from the pandemic. It's allowed me to creatively, anyway. It's
Yeah,
allowed me to move forward with a lot of things. Obviously, like everyone else, you have your day to day challenges, but it's I've actually yeah, from a creative point of view, I'm quite grateful
yeah,
that
because
I've been given the opportunity to do it. Yeah.
yeah, because even when you're busy, you've got that time to think about things because you're in a comfortable environment. You're not in that workplace environment
Mhm.
anymore. So at least that's how I've found it. Do you know what I mean? It's more I'm more relaxed, therefore it's a bit more fluid creatively.
Mhm.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I
no,
would agree with that.
absolutely love it. So you know how the show goes. You've seen a few of the episodes, as you've said. We're going to get straight on with the questions. If you're watching, don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content, all that good stuff. Go check out MJ's his Patreon, his Twitter. All the links are going to be in the description below. But I think we're going to get straight on with it. So the first question, as you know, is what was your first experience with Final Fantasy VII? All the compilation. Now, I put all the compilation in there, you know, for the younger ones. I assume, and I'm pretty certain you would, the original game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My I didn't actually own Final Fantasy VII for about 6 months after it came out. I first watched a friend play it. I think quite a lot of us have that same story that
yeah.
they were introduced to it by a friend.
For me, it
Um,
was a friend who hated it. He played it and was
oh
like, oh, I
really?
don't like this. Do you want it? I was like, yeah, go on, then I'll check it
Yeah.
out.
Oh.
Thank you.
So I vividly remember watching my friend play it, and he got as far as the cargo ship.
Okay, yeah,
And I think because we were only 11 or 12 at the time,
yeah.
it didn't really work out that the best way to. It was kind of under leveled by the time he had to fight Genova.
Oh, danger.
Yeah, which I think Genova, if you're under leveled, becomes the hardest boss up to
Horrible
that
fight.
point in the
Yeah,
game.
that fight, if you go in too weak, because I mean, if I remember right, it can cast stop on you and stuff like that, can't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the tail laser just absolutely decimates you.
yeah.
Um, So I remember him kind of really struggling with that, and neither of us really had the sort of know-how with RPGs to be like, okay, let's just grind for a little
Yeah.
while, level up, and then tackle Genova again. So he sort of gave up on the game for a little bit and loaned me it, and I thought, yeah, I actually really like this. I'm going to get my own copy, and just absolutely hammered it. And it took maybe a couple of months, just again because I was young and didn't have access to a PlayStation every single day. It took me a couple of months to get through,
Yeah.
and I ended up finishing the game before he did. And because by that point, I was seeing something for the first time that he and I hadn't shared. It was kind of quite a profound moment
Yeah.
in my life, and I think just because of the age I was at, and I think so many people have said the same thing. That if you were introduced to Final Fantasy VII for the first time in your sort of formative years, like that sort of somewhere between 11 and 15, like it did leave that lasting impression just because of the enormity of the themes.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's kind of stuck with me. Like it was the first time I played it, it was my favorite game, and it has never stopped being my favorite game. And the impact it's had on my life has just gone.
Well, yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
look at everything that's happening now.
so that's it. And I'm really grateful that the game that I chose to fall in love with is the game that Square Enix has become their cash cow.
No, but it is amazing thinking. I mean, like, if you go back to like 98, 99, when Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy IX dropped, to imagine that 20 years later, 7 would be back again. Do you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
even going back as far. I mean, what was the last part of the compilation that dropped before 7? Was it
No, Crisis Core was the
Crisis
last
Core?
one.
So, I mean, even then, you wouldn't have thought, oh yeah, we're gonna get more of this in the future. It is just mind blowing.
Well, I disagree. I was hopeful that we were going to get more in the future
Oh,
because
it
of
was
the
always
way
hopeful.
Cerberus ended, but
Always hopeful.
and it's yeah, I never because I got involved with the forums through the writing. So
Yeah.
from round about the time Advent Children came out, I got involved with online forums and
What's that
have
like?
never really.
2002,
And
2001,
well,
2002?
it came out. The Advent Children came out in the West in 2005.
Was it 2005?
So it was around about 2004 that I started getting involved in the forums.
Yeah.
So I've always been plugged into the online Final Fantasy community.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what has helped me keep the spirit alive, and always encouraged me to continue with the writing. And
Yeah, because it's
you know
been
one
ongoing, hasn't it?
yeah, so I've been writing about Final Fantasy VII in one form or another for the best part of 20 years now. So it's don't get me wrong, it's not all been novels and stuff, but yeah, it's never
It all
far
builds
from my
though, doesn't
mind.
it? It's all stepping stones and building points to where we're at now, which is novels.
Well, that's it. So, I mean, it's and the thing that most writers will tell you is that when you look back over your career, you can see how one thing has affected the next, which has affected the
Yeah.
next, and you would never have been able to take that step. Like Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII would never have happened if I hadn't done the Nibelheim incident,
Yeah.
which would never have happened if I hadn't become involved with Kuppelkon, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's interesting the way that sort of life kind of finds your path for
Yeah,
you
the way it pans
sometimes.
out. So,
Uh,
side question. Was
mhm.
7 your first JRPG?
Yeah,
So
and
you're the same as me then, this is your completely first step into that world. Oh, love it.
I'm actually going to admit something which I don't typically admit. Like
Oh,
I'm usually because I've been plugged into the Final Fantasy community for a long time. I'm quite aware of what's going on in the video games world.
yeah.
Even though, especially now that I'm a dad, I don't really have a lot of time to game. But I have never played a JRPG that isn't a Final Fantasy game.
Oh,
Dun, dun, dun. So
cancelling.
that's how exclusive I am.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, if you've not got the time, then you've not got the time, really. I feel like that it is what it is,
Yeah,
and
but even when I did have the time,
just
I
couldn't
didn't
bother.
play.
It's like, I'm
Yeah, yeah. That's how big a deal Final Fantasy VII, and to
So
a
we
lesser
definitely have
extent,
to get you exposed to Chrono Trigger at the very
yeah.
least.
You know, I've never played Chrono Trigger,
Oh,
never played Secret of Mana, never
Earthbound? No, no.
nothing.
Oh,
Legend of Dragoon, not even other Square Enix JRPGs,
just Final
no,
Fantasy.
just Final
But to
Fantasy.
be fair, it's not as if there's a shortage of Final Fantasy games, is there?
That's true. I'm sort of
I was kind of
I
looking at it the other week, like how many there actually are, and like once you go outside the numbered ones, there's so many different little subtitles and things. I was like, wow.
yeah.
Like
I
I
know.
thought I'd played every Final Fantasy. I have not played every Final Fantasy.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of the game as well, is how diverse they are. Both,
Yes.
you know, especially when you get to sort of after four, how diverse they are in both story and the gameplay.
Yep.
So I mean, you don't really need to deviate from the Final Fantasy
Yeah,
series
because
because
Square have
they,
always innovated with gameplay, definitely.
you know, and even the bloody compilation itself, like every single game's
Different.
wildly different.
Yep.
Yeah,
Dirge.
I know. Do you know what? I loved Dirge. I hated the gameplay,
Just
but I
looking at
loved
my
the
copy.
story.
Yeah, the concepts are brilliant. I'm just looking at my copy now with dirty eyes. I hate it. But no, the concepts in the game are brilliant. It is purely just an execution thing. Like if
Yeah,
they would have made it more of an action RPG rather than well, it's like an FPS basically, isn't it? A really bad one.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. You know, it's kind of PlayStation 2 era
I imagine it.
shocker
I don't know if
of
you've
a shoot
played
'em
it,
up.
but did you ever play Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver on PS1?
No, I think I played the demo of it when I was a kid, but I never played the actual game.
I think something like that would have worked brilliant for Dirge of Cerberus, you know, that kind of gameplay. But oh well.
Yeah, and obviously they've taken up on what they hoped might work, and if it
Yeah.
wasn't for the fact that it was a Final Fantasy VII game,
Oh,
I wouldn't
yeah.
have. Yeah, I would have, you know, kind
Mm.
of breezed past it in the shop and not thought twice.
I think most people would have done as well, to be honest. Although then again, no, yeah, definitely everyone would have avoided it. No, everyone would have avoided it like the plague. It had Vincent in it. I mean, like I can't remember who it was I was talking about with. I think it was Baby Seal or maybe Ray. Everybody loved Vincent back then. Like Vincent was just
Yeah,
stupid the amounts of hype for him.
yeah. For a guy that doesn't actually have a massive role in the original
Yeah,
game,
he's a bonus character.
he's done not too badly for himself.
I can't wait for him to appear in like the remake. It's going to be interesting to see how they make him work.
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be quite fun. It'll be
I
interesting to see.
think I think it's going to be like you
Zooms into
remember the way
Dirge of
that.
Cerberus gameplay. Oh,
Do you remember everyone waiting on Tifa being revealed? In
yeah,
the original remake, it's going to be the same, but for Vincent.
yes.
Uh, the other way about for part two or for part three. So I can't
And here
wait.
I am just waiting for Sid.
Yeah, I mean, Sid doesn't have the same sex appeal.
Hey, hey, hey. Sid is a
It's
beautiful man.
because he smokes.
It
Don't
is, it
smoke,
is, it
kids.
is.
Don't
Yeah.
smoke
Yes, don't smoke.
or swear.
It's bad for well, swear maybe. So this next one is we've kind of already covered this one quite a bit, but the next question is like, how would you say that Final Fantasy VII has influenced you in your life? And
I
yeah,
mean, I mean, how long do you want to make the program? Uh,
I mean, what did me and Ray coming out like 2.5 hours, something like
yeah,
that?
yeah, that was pretty mad. Um,
Oh, some
yeah,
tangents.
it's had a pretty monumental
Yeah.
impact on my life.
Would you say that started pretty much straight away? Just to kind of reframe the question a little bit, because we have chatted about this a lot. Would you say that that was something that happened immediately, or would you say that it's something that's happened more recently? Like, where would you say?
It's more like a kind of upward trajectory.
Yeah, it's just
That
kind of took off. I don't know why I did that.
yeah, it started off. It's affected me in different ways over
Yeah,
the years. Like initially, after I played the game, the impact it had on me is that it helped kind of shape my understanding of the world
yeah,
in terms of environmentalism, in terms of spiritualism, capitalism.
yeah,
And I kind of grew up in a household where my parents were, or my mum in particular was quite religious.
yeah,
Both of them were um, vegetarians, but they were vegetarians because they were kind of anti. Or effectively when they started being vegetarians, it was kind of in protest of the way that British farming was.
Yeah.
So it was it was a big kind of deal in the
More
early
of a
80s
moral
about
thing rather than anything else. Yeah.
yeah the way that the animals were being treated and killed was it was quite a big movement in the early 80s to try and change farming methods.
Yeah.
And my parents sort of afterwards just realised that well, there's some health benefits to this. And I grew up in a sort of vegetarian household, and off the back of that, I already had this growing up. I wouldn't say my parents were kind of hippies or
No, but you were
you know,
aware. You had this
yeah,
awareness.
there,
Yeah.
there was absolutely a sort of degree of awareness of environmentalism of we were recycling things a
Yeah.
decade before everyone else was
Yeah.
sort of thing. And that was kind of what was normal to me. So to actually take those themes and then build a story around them in a way that I could understand at that age was pretty powerful to me. So I had really serious, long-lasting effects to the point where a lot of my philosophies in life are based on what I learned from Final Fantasy VII. So from a young age, it had an enormous impact on me, and I think as I grew older, it became a sort of comfort thing. When you get into your sort of late teens, and sometimes hormones are all over the place, or
Yeah.
sometimes you're just having a bad time, and you need that comfort. So Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII were
Yes.
those comforts for me. You kind of felt as if you were going home. You felt as if you were among friends.
Final Fantasy VIII love as well. Good on you. Good on you.
Yeah. So it's still my favorite love story, Final Fantasy VIII.
I really like it. Like a lot of people complain about like the mechanics, like the junction system and that. I thought the junction system was perfect. There was no problems. As long
Do
as you
you
played your
know?
triple triad, everything was fine.
Well, that was kind of it. And it's such a weird thing to say that I only realised in later years that actually I didn't really like the junction system, but I didn't realise I didn't like it until other people started hating on it
Oh,
uh,
I just
as an
hate.
adult.
I get the complaints about drawing magic, but just don't draw magic.
Yeah, but I think this is kind of thing where because I hadn't really experienced any other JRPGs,
Essentially, yeah.
that I didn't have a huge amount to compare to, so it just seemed like a normal thing in a game. It's just this is what the game is, accept it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was the same with Final Fantasy IX actually. I kind of found that the system of the having only two summoners, I hated that. Really, really hated that.
I was a
But I
bit
didn't.
weird with nine initially as well. Like it just didn't feel right. I replayed it like 5 or 6 years later. It made sense at that
Yeah,
point. I played it again recently, and oh my god.
nine's an amazing game. But yeah, I like
I think
when it.
it's definitely a game that when you're older you'll appreciate it more. I
Yeah,
definitely feel with that with nine, just for the narrative. Like,
and I think for me it was more when I picked it up. It was again what the standard for me in a Final Fantasy game was 7 and 8,
yep,
and 9 was so different because it went back to the fantasy element
yep,
and had gone back to to a certain degree the job system.
yeah, and
And these,
learning
these
skills from gear and things like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and these were things I hadn't really experienced before. Certainly not to the same extent. So I found it quite challenging to begin with.
yeah,
Um, but kind of back to the topic.
yeah. Tangent. This is how it happens. This is how you end up at 2.5 hours.
Yeah, so the the thing for again going back to the sort of Final Fantasy VII was a comfort thing for me,
Yeah,
and I've realised over the years that I'm quite a creative person at heart, but I'm creative not necessarily because I want to be creative, but because I have this sort of need to
yeah,
express myself in that way. It's kind of more therapeutic than anything.
yeah.
And I used Final Fantasy VII, just writing down what I was seeing as a way of expressing that
It's a creative outlet.
creatively.
Yeah,
And that kind of had a massive impact on me because it allowed me to sort of focus whenever I was feeling down or feeling angry or whatever. It gave me something to focus on. And the next step was eventually posting it online and having that degree of acceptance.
yeah.
Of
Which is a
yeah,
big step, to be fair, because you're putting it out there for people to not only necessarily like, but to critique as well. And it's a risk. It's a big risk.
yeah. I don't know if you found this growing up, that I kind of grew up in an environment where there was maybe a couple of other guys at school that I knew that played the game,
Yep.
but in my group of friends, as I was getting older, like nobody knew it, nobody gave a shit about it.
Yep.
Trying to explain this to a girlfriend that I met when I was 18, and she was like,
What?
"Ah, you are just talking absolute nonsense."
It's like that meme where the guy's in a club talking into the woman's ear and she's just there like, what?
Yeah, so that was pretty much my entire relationship. Yeah, um, but that way, when something means that much to you and it has such a big part of your life, but the people closest to you are just totally separate to it. So
Yes. Yeah, like, I've tried
that
to force my missus to play at least one Final Fantasy, like 10 or, one of the more modern ones. Not having it. Not having it.
Yeah, my missus, she's not interested in gaming at all, and I wouldn't. I'm getting my kids there, so
Yeah.
that's my degree of control. Um,
You can
I'm
mould them
gonna
into the gamers of the
Yeah,
future.
so I'm gonna
Yes.
mess them up. I won't mess my missus up. I'll mess them up. Um,
That's what parents do in general, isn't it? I
yeah,
think that's just the job.
yeah, basically. So, but kind of sticking the creative side of things online and getting that acceptance and getting to speak to other people that felt the same way that I did
Yes.
was a big step. And of course, that progressed on to putting books out there, which led to CooperCon, and the CooperCon had a massive impact because it then put
Brings you together.
it, yeah, it was no longer just an online thing. It
Yeah.
was like you're now at an event with hundreds of other
I
people,
do
and
need to get myself to like the next one that goes on because yeah, it looks like amazing fun.
it's one of the best experiences I've ever had. All,
Yeah.
all the events are just top notch, and it's because everyone is there to celebrate Final Fantasy. It's
Just
there's
positive.
basically that's it. You just ride this energy for days. I can't recommend it enough. The next one I believe is in London in March.
Yeah.
So they've got a wee event going on in London this weekend that we're recording, but it's not an event just
Yeah.
because of the pandemic situation.
Yeah. It's
It's
still a
more of
bit
a kind of
shaky. Still a bit shaky at the minute.
but I would recommend to anyone, either in the UK or North America, if you can get yourself to a CooperCon, highly recommend it because I'll probably be there. Um,
I'll
but
try.
yeah, kind of. But that was it. It was kind of taking the next step of, people are coming to speak to me because they like what I do, and I'd
Yes.
never received that sort of adulation before, and it's a kind of weird thing to experience, because I'd always just done it effectively from behind a screen.
Yeah. No, I can imagine
Um,
that because even when I get like, when you get positive comments on your videos and stuff like that, even I feel then a bit like, oh, do I deserve that, really? It makes
so
me
it's
feel a bit weird, yeah. But I like
so
it.
yeah, so yeah, it definitely kind of plays into that imposter syndrome
Yeah.
side of things, but it's kind of weird that going and participating in this and meeting people that love it, and then being on stage or doing signings with people that are actually in the more modern games. Like the first event I ever did had Ray Chase, who's Noctis, John Campling, who's Regis, and Liam Mulvey, who's Libertus from Kingsglaive. And it's gone from there. I've kind of shared a stage with Ali Hillis, who's Lightning, Nicholas Bolton, who's Roban from 14.
Oh, no way.
Um, quite a lot of the Final Fantasy 15 boys actually, and of course the most recent one's John Bentley. Like,
Yes.
spent quite a bit of time with John Bentley.
I would definitely love to chat to him at some point because he just seems like such a good guy. And
He's
amazingly, I was
amazing.
looking through his IMDb the other day. The amount of shows I guarantee I've seen him in over the years is insane.
Yeah,
Like, check
and
his IMDb out if you haven't. Like, not
it's
you,
it's
the viewers,
amazing.
obviously.
Looking back, and there's
X
because
Files, Chicago Hope,
yeah,
stuff like that.
he's
It's like,
in
what?
Friends as well.
Yes! Like, what?
It's like one of my favorite things is, because a lot of my Facebook friends are from CooperCon and know John as well. Like every other week, somebody spots him in something else. It's like here
There
he
he
is in
is!
Fire. Yeah, here he is in Friends. Here he is in Firefly. Like he plays
Oh,
Nick Fury in one of the Marvels.
he
What?
does one of the
Marvel
voices
event.
in like the latter stages of Naruto as well. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure he does one of the tail beasts. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, he does one of them. It's amazing the amount of stuff he's been in over the years.
but
Games, TV, everything.
John's amazing. If you get the opportunity to speak to John, just grab it with both hands because
Yeah,
he's
I think
just
I
a
will.
fantastic, a
I think I
fantastic
need
guy.
to. Might have to try and get him on for a special version of the Big Seven, possibly. I'll see. I'll have to see about that.
But that's so that's yeah that's kind of been my trajectory and again with off the back of CooperCon, creating books for them,
Yes.
getting get or winning awards for these productions, which then led to the Norse Myths book, which then led to actually spending far more time on social media, effectively, uh, just doing the rounds on
Yeah.
a
Doing all
lot
the
of the
promotion.
content creators.
Yep.
So it means now that I've been able to interact with an awful lot more fans in a different way, and it's just been a crazy ride, and I've loved every second of it. And I'm so grateful to everyone that's kind of helped along the way.
Yeah.
That yeah, I'm just like everybody else. I'm just a fan that sort of got lucky.
Well,
Uh,
this is it. We're all just fans of the game and the series. This is crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
so I'm thrilled to just be invited onto shows like this just to talk nonsense.
Well, this is a
And
big
just
thing for me as well because, like, I don't really know that many of you. I've not really interacted. I'm pretty new on the scene. I've been about, like, what now? Is it about a year and a half, something like that? So it's kind of an opportunity for me to get to know everybody as well and share these stories. And yeah, it's so fulfilling. It really is
yeah,
good. I love it.
it's I totally agree with you on that. It, yeah, being able to connect with people who understand what you're talking about on a kind of spiritual level
Yeah.
is yeah,
And this is the joy of
it's
the
different.
internet. I mean, it brings us a lot of bad things. Like everyone whinges about social media and things like that, but the connections that it's allowed us to have. Like, I mean, I remember I grew up in the 90s. I remember when 56K was just barely becoming a thing. Loading a picture on a website took about 3 days, that sort of
Yeah,
thing. And to see where we're at now, it's crazy.
yeah,
Crazy.
it's pretty mind blowing. I keep walking into my living room and watching like my 3-year-old son playing Mario 3D World on a Switch and just being like,
Yeah. We had
how?
rocks.
Yeah, Jesus, man. We had Zool. That was it.
Zool, yes. Oh,
Zool.
I love that you
We
got
had
it in there. Love
we
it.
had Zool on floppy disks.
Oh.
That was the highlight of our youth.
Sensible soccer, stuff like that.
Yeah, do you remember?
Oh,
Do you remember Sensible Soccer
yeah, man.
Army Men?
Do you remember the weird one, which was it was unsensible soccer, and you were the goalkeeper and you were just lobbing grenades at these players running down the pitch? It's like, what
Uh,
is this?
I don't remember that, but I do. There was the Army Men one where it was the desert camouflage
Oh
and the
yeah,
forest camouflage, and you were kicking the ball was a bomb, and the game was over when it exploded.
like a cross between cannon fodder and football.
Yeah, it was mental, absolutely mental.
Oh,
Uh,
good times,
so
man.
God, aye, those were the days.
Good times. Oh, the Amiga. I'd like the Amiga was where I played all them old ones, like sensible soccer and stuff like that. I've still got it. I've not set it up or anything like that. It's just boxed away. But damn, what a time! Oh, I love it. Right, so we're going to jump into the next question now. So this one's more of a quick opinion kind of thing. What character, well, which character, English, in the compilation is your favourite? Now, I'm not going to limit you to FF7. It can be anyone from throughout the compilation.
Um, Mine's is I should probably Zach, and
Nice.
it was Zach before Crisis Core even came out. And I think I thoroughly enjoyed Crisis Core, and I really enjoyed Zach's story in it. Um,
Yeah, Crisis Core was
but
a weird one for me. The story was good. It was the gameplay. It was just a bit weird. But anyway.
I was okay with the gameplay, but I think it just seemed a bit more like a limiting version of Kingdom Hearts.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah.
but yeah, I hated the slot reel. That
Oh,
was
I was talking to Lolly about this the other day, and it's like they decided they wanted it in that final fight because it does work in that final fight
yeah.
100%. And they thought, right, well, if we're going to have it there, we better just reverse engineer it back.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you in your observation that it it does. It absolutely works in the final fight, but
Yeah.
to make an entire combat system out of it, just to have that at the end is like, Jesus, come on, like just. But I mean, like the story itself and the
Yeah.
build up to it, again, because it was part of the forums, that it was so much fun just speculating on what was coming out and all that stuff. But the reason that Zack's actually my favourite, it goes way back to the original game,
Yeah.
and it kind of understanding for the first time that Zack, or without Zack's sacrifice, Cloud's story couldn't happen.
Yep.
So it kind of, it was the first time I was ever introduced to the concept in a story of a character who's on screen for such a small amount of time can have such a monumental impact.
Yep.
And that kind of stuck with me for years. And I suppose now, like now that I'm a bit older, you know, I still love the character to bits, and it still brings a tear to my
So when you saw
seeing
him
them
at
on
the end of
screen.
Remake, then you were like,
I was, the first time I saw it, I was in tears, crying,
yes.
and then when he survived at the end, I was kind of like,
Oh.
oh, because the whole reason I loved him in the first place was because of the
Sacrifice.
sacrifice. So if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
take the
What are they doing to my
sacrifice away,
boy? What are they doing to my boy?
so yeah, so now I hate him.
Oh, well, there we go then.
But no, I think I love Vincent as well. Really
Yeah,
love Vincent. I think he's such a cool character. But if I had to pick one character to love in the compilation, it would be Zack, and it would be for the story element of what he sacrificed so that everyone else could
because
have their great story.
yeah, because he sets the whole thing in motion. Like his actions at the reactor, like his actions after the reactor. You know, protecting Cloud, getting him back to Midgar. You could even argue that his interactions with Aerith, you know, kind of set her on the
Yeah,
path to be who she is. So there's not really many more influential characters
yeah,
in the compilation than Zack.
absolutely. Well, I think there's one more character, that would be Hojo. I think
Well,
Hojo's got
yeah, Hojo's a
a
naughty boy. We don't talk about
he's
Hojo.
he has created every single issue that has arisen.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
pretty much.
so yeah, as you say, he's a naughty boy, but definitely my favourite would be Zack.
I do love the way that they're presenting Hojo in Remake. Like he's so sinister and slimy and just like, oh my god, get this guy off the screen. But actually, no, keep going.
Yeah, well, you know what? I agree that the way he's been presented in Remake is amazing, and there's something just so disturbing about his scene with Aerith,
Oh,
when
it's
he's kind of talking
horrifying.
about, like, I mean, it's so over the top, but
Especially, have you read the Chris Two Paths Aerith?
mhm.
So especially when you get some of the context about like what went.
But my take on it is that having watched Hojo in the original game and watching him in Crisis Core in particular, you get like in Dirge of Cerberus, Dirge of Cerberus, he's like a pantomime villain, but
Yeah, he becomes a
in,
clown almost. He becomes
yeah,
Kefka.
yeah, but in Crisis Core, you see this sort of comical side to him where he just doesn't give a shit.
Yeah,
Like he's there for science, and if for the benefit of science has to give up his life tomorrow, he would do it without
yeah.
question, sort of thing. And because of that, he becomes such a dangerous player.
Because he thinks that what he's doing is right and for the best of
Yeah,
humanity and for the planet, and it's like you're
yeah.
crazy, mate.
If you find someone that's that clever with no ethics, it becomes a really quite sinister thing. But I th- the again, as you touched on, with traces of two pasts and with picturing the past as well.
Yes.
Um, there's parts of Hojo where when you see the context of why he's speaking to Aerith that way, because he already knows that Aerith can go into a trance-like state.
Yep.
And I think the reason that
Trying to trigger it.
he's trying to trigger her trance, because obviously he's not seen her for all these years, so
Yeah,
he's
so his
trying to.
last kind of thing was in Picture in the Past where she just kind of snaps basically and starts drawing, doesn't she?
Yeah, so I don't think that's his default position. I think the reason he's being that creepy and haunting is to try and trigger her. So I think when we get to part two, we'll probably see the more Costa del Sol.
I was about to say, we're going to
like,
get to see him just there, topless on the beach, like ladies.
yeah, or maybe not even topless, maybe still with his jacket on.
Oh
Just,
yeah, yeah,
I would love that.
sweating
A
it
kind of,
out.
yeah, like a full lab coat just with bloodstains all over it and a wee pair of Speedos.
Oh,
That would,
that'd be horrifying. All these bikini-clad women, and then just Hojo looking demented in the middle. Dude.
just this sunburned strip right down where the coat's parted.
Oh, that's going to be horrifying. I'm actually now thinking about that scene, and it's not going to be good in any way, shape, or form.
No, no, naked Hojo is not the best.
Oh God. Well, no, I get what you're saying, Zach. I think you're actually the first person that said that, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting. I like it.
Mm.
I like it. We've had a couple
So
of
no,
clouds,
there's
I think. We've had a Tifa. God,
uh,
my memory's shit.
oh goodness, yeah. I would throw in as well that I love Bugenhagen. He's amazing.
Oh, cannot wait. I literally cannot wait for Bugenhagen. Well, yeah, it's just going to be because
He's
I think he's going to know, but he's not going to know. If you know what I mean, he's going to know something's going on. He's going to have picked it up, but he's not going to exactly know what's going on. So he won't have as
yeah,
much info as like Aerith's had at certain stages. But yeah,
yeah. I think what they're going to do is everything that happens at Cosmo Canyon in the original game when they talk a bit about the ancients or when they talk a bit about kind of Gast coming with
yeah,
kind of having realised what happened with Genova. I reckon they'll expand on that, and you'll get to learn a lot about the ancients, or you'll get to learn a lot more about the history between Genova and the ancients.
yeah. So we'll get like an
Yeah,
expanded version of that CGI from the Shinra building kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
would love that.
non-propaganda version.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much they could do with it, and
Yeah,
I'm massively excited. Probably to the extent where, outside of the Nibelheim instant stuff, I think Cosmo Canyon and all the interactions with the elders and with Bugenhagen that's what I'm most looking forward to,
yeah.
and
I mean,
hopefully the next part.
well, this is it. I was about to say I can kind of see. I mean, it's tough to speculate on it because given the scale of expansion they did in Midgar, if they expand everything to that scale, we'll get into June on and that's it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But I don't think they're going to do that. I do think we're probably going to reach Nibelheim. Like, I've just got a feeling that we're going to get that far, which would make Cosmo Canyon a pretty pivotal moment in the game because it's just
yeah.
as you're going into the final section. Yeah, I have hopes. I have hopes and dreams.
I mean, it would make I think it would make a lot of sense story wise to end at Nibelheim.
Yeah,
Because obviously we find Sephiroth there anyway. It's a good place to start the next part of the game,
yeah,
particularly if you then introduce Vincent at the start of the next part.
yeah.
Um, then
Yeah,
or
they could
you
do the
could kind
same
of
thing they've done with Red 13, where he's there but you can't control him, and then from part 3 onwards, he's in.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
So there's lots and lots, and obviously again, what happens at Cosmo Canyon sets the scene for some of the things you could then go on to learn about the calamity
yeah.
at Nibelheim, and all the big twists that will come with that. So
I personally think there's going to be something that changes. When we get there to Nibelheim, there's got to be something. Like I
yeah,
can't. Oh, it's too tempting for him. I think there's so many things that they could do there. It's just so many possibilities. Yeah,
Sam, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the conversation you have with Sephiroth at Nibelheim is the first time you learn that Genova's not an ancient. She's actually an alien.
I think. Yeah, I think it is actually. Yeah, because he
Um,
says that Gast
well, that's and
misinterpreted, didn't he? That's what he kind of says
yeah,
to you.
the dialogue at Cosmo Canyon is that Gast realised he'd made a terrible mistake,
That's it.
and then when you go to Nibelheim and speak to Sephiroth starts talking about Genova was the calamity from the sky.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously
Beautiful the
it's
way they
already,
drip fed that stuff to you throughout the game.
but it's already been introduced. Now
Yeah.
kind of through Aerith that they're not going to go down the surprise. Genova's not etc. Um, So I mean, it'd be good to see what the twist on that's going to be. And I think the best way to do it is just to expand on the story. And I
Yeah.
would love flashbacks to that era. My
Sieging
God,
over
like
in a pump,
yeah,
wrecking some
Jesus,
Cetra. Oh,
yeah, that would be amazing.
yeah. I mean, it's the last time that they're going to touch Final Fantasy VII as a compilation. You've got to squeeze stuff like that in. Because I like once the remake project's done, that's it. I think
Yeah,
they're done with Seven at that point. They've got to be surely. So let's get as much as we can into the game, boys. Let's
yeah,
get as much as we can in.
absolutely. It would be good to see, you know, even a fight between Genova and the Cetra, where you know I love Baby Seal's headcanon about Genova taking on the form of Shiva, which is why she's got that
Yeah, yeah.
sexy female appearance. But uh,
I
you know,
also quite
another.
like the 12 Cetra becoming the Knights of the Round. I know that's been debunked completely, but I do like it. I still like it.
I think Dirge of Cerberus really set up the thing about Nero's darkness coming from the same origin as Chaos, kind
Yeah.
of through Stagnant Mako, or Mako, sorry. But it'd be good, you know, the way. Have you played Intermission yet?
I've not. I've not. I've spoiled
Right,
myself
okay.
entirely on it, but I've not
Right,
played it.
okay. So, well, at the end, when Nero's kind of casting his dark magic and it's got the big tendrils coming up through the
Yeah.
ground and stuff, that's fairly visually reminiscent of what's going on with Genova Dreamweaver. So it'd be good to see, oh, okay, maybe there's a crossover there.
It's
So,
also very similar to, when Sephiroth at the end of Advent Children, and you get all the black wisps
oh
coming
yeah,
up from
yeah,
the ground and stuff like that. Yeah, same sort. They do like leaning on that kind of that visual kind of. I mean, I suppose it comes back to like the negative live stream, doesn't it, and things
yeah.
like that. So, but yeah, it's
Like,
very interesting how these things have stayed consistent throughout the compilation for the most part, at least.
so I would love something like that,
Yeah.
just to maybe give a very very brief background nod to where some of Nero's abilities come from, the kind of tie in with Stagnant Mako or Genova or
But we're
whatever.
kind of leaning into like Omega territory then and stuff like
Mm.
that as well, which also has got to factor in some way, shape, or form because if Sephiroth's plan is the same as it always has been, Omega's like a vehicle for that. If you
Yeah,
can't get the black materia, you might have to fall back on that. It is possible. They've got. Plus, is Omega going to be? I've said it three different ways now. I hate myself. But is Omega going to allow Sephiroth to do what he wants to do? Do you know what I mean? Because it never reached that point in the original game. Aerith and the party stopped him from doing what he wanted to do.
yeah.
Imagine if he is going to succeed, but then the planet really steps it up and goes, right, you go deal with this, and we see Sephiroth like having to face down against Omega or something like that.
Yeah.
So many
Well,
possibilities.
maybe that's the point of he's actually successful with the black materia and manages to smash Meteor into the planet, which will trigger Omega.
And then you can just go, yoink, let's
Yeah.
go.
See you later.
Hi, guys.
Um, so yeah, there's a multitude of ways they could handle this, and I'm massively excited
Yeah,
to see what they can do. And I agree that Omega makes the most sense, particularly now that with the episode intermission, they've absolutely canonized
yeah, Dirge is
the
in.
Dodge's service. So
Dirge is in. Yeah. And they wouldn't have done that if they weren't going to at least run with it somewhere. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it might not be Omega, it might be that Genesis and Vice turn up at some point and we get a continuation of that end of Dirge kind of. Because it is still a mystery, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
what's Genesis done there? What's going on? So we
yeah,
might get that, but there's definitely going to be something Dirge related that carries through, I think, 100%.
I'd like to think so because there are, and again, it wasn't even just the episode intermission stuff. Like they very clearly set the scene in the original or the actual remake itself.
Yep.
And there's, outside of the facility, there are bits and pieces of information that, like, yeah, that's you're not messing about here. Like, as deep ground exists,
Yeah, this is it.
that's wild.
All
Yeah,
this stuff is being folded in gradually, and it's nice to see. It's definitely nice to see because with one of the big complaints about parts of the compilation being the execution, this is the opportunity to execute it better.
Yeah.
And like change those perceptions. And I definitely think they've done that with Nero and Vice in Intermission, because those characters are night and day compared to what they were in Dirge of Cerberus. They're so much better. Like the characterization's just
It's amazing. I think having the sort of same writing team across the entire remake project is going to make a massive amount of difference, because the consistency of writing is going to be key. And obviously Najima is 10 years older from where he was when Crisis Core dropped. That he's done enough in his time to be like, okay, I've now refined my craft.
Yes.
And
you can see how much creativity he's still got for it as well, with these like light novels and things like that.
Yeah. Do you know what I love about it is just how invested he is in the compilation, and there's so many little details. Just the acknowledgement in what do you call it? In Traces of Two Past, of Tifa's interaction with the Turks on Mount Nebel, which canonizes the chapter from before Crisis.
Which means we're going to see a lot more of that being folded in over time now.
Which also, I don't know if anyone else has sort of picked up on this. It actually specifies that it's a female Turk, which it's one of three things. Either it's just a 50-50 coincidence, or it could be that most videos, or all of the videos that are on YouTube, are a playthrough using the sort of female shotgun figure. But there's actually in Last Order, the Turk one of the Turks from before Crisis shows up very briefly at the reactor after Cloud has killed Sephiroth, and it's the martial arts female. So if you watch Last Order again after Cloud,
you're asking a bit of me there to watch Last Order again.
Fair enough. But yeah, after Sephiroth jumps into the Mako and Cloud collapses, one of the female Turks is at the doorway on the phone to sung.
I will have to, I'll at least have to skim and check that, because it's been a while.
So there's at least consistency there, to the point where, again, it's a 50-50. You could have just just specified it's female and move on, but it's at least consistent with
what
all the other material out there, which
it's that attention to detail as well. Like it's going to serve them well going forwards, I hope. I really do, because it does seem like they're throwing everything into this.
Yeah, it cares, and that's really important to me, that it cares.
Yeah.
Because I've followed his work in Final Fantasy VII, and I've loved his work, and we're at a point now where I'm really happy that or Najima in particular, obviously there's other writers that are kind of chipping in, but Najima with the scenarios and with the dialogue, and like it's one guy who's keeping it consistent, and it's the guy who wrote the originals. So there's
he's kind of got the framework in his mind that everything else is kind of coming into, and he's kind of keeping it together. Yeah.
So as much as obviously the remake story has taken a bit of a twist in terms of the whispers and all that sort of stuff, the finer details are all consistent, which tells me that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I trust. I
do think we'll see the whispers again at some point. I don't think they're done. I genuinely don't think they're done. Maybe we won't see the whispers, but we'll get more context on the whispers, possibly from Bugenhagen. But there will definitely be more. I don't think it will be left as it is now. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're done. Sephiroth ate them. Nom nom.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I agree. There's, I think the ending is actually a massive red herring, but we'll get to that at some point.
Oh yes, we will. So I mean, we've just kind of touched on this one a little bit, but where are you at with Remake? Like, how confident, how positive about it are you? Because I mean, like I've said before, there is a split. It's not a 50-50 split. It's more like an 80-20 split, something like that, of like the people that aren't very happy with Remake. Where do you sit on that spectrum? Pretty sure I know.
Yeah. I love almost everything about it. For me, Remake's all about the story.
Yeah.
I'm not like a trophy hunter, or I'm not too fussed about kind of exactly how the gameplay mechanics handle, or what materia joins with what, and for best outcome in hard mode battles. Like that's not why I play.
You
I
want the
played for the
narrative.
story.
Yeah.
And when I first played through Remake and got to chapter 18 and entered the singularity, it was very much a what's happening here. And the game ended, and particularly with the kind of the scene of Zack supposedly having survived the last battle. I was just like, this doesn't sit well with me at all.
It was a short-term crisis. Yeah. I was there.
So yeah, it really threw me. I wasn't comfortable with it at all.
This fight was amazing, but what are they doing?
So it took me a couple of days to process, and then I
Yeah.
started to realise, right, in my mind, what they've done here is, they had to find a way to include Sephiroth in part one.
Yeah, because the cat's out of the bag.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I've said this, in other shows, that there is effectively only one way that they could have brought excitement and uncertainty to future parts of Remake, to the point where it seems mad now if we go back to early April 2020 and had a conversation and said, at the end of Remake, you're not going to know what will happen for the rest of Final Fantasy VII. It would have seemed mental. But here we are. We don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the Remake. And from a business point of view, that is a phenomenally clever thing to have done, because it keeps us talking, it keeps us on our toes. It means that the people that might have thought, well, it's only a kind of remaster, I'm not going to bother with it. No, it's not. It's actually it's a different experience now.
This is it. I mean, like, for me, it was, I know a lot of people went in expecting a remake, expecting the original game, but expanded. Like, no one was expecting one for one, I don't think. I think everyone knew there were going to have to be changes and things like that. But, like, for me, it took me a couple of days, like you say, to kind of process it. And then I reached the point where I was like, oh, so it's a sequel then. That was kind of where I hit. It was like, this isn't the original game. This is something different, but the same at the same time. So you are still going to hit most of the plot beats. Like, personally, for me, I think it's going to diverge more the further we get. So towards the end of Remake, it'll be massively different to the end of the OG. That's kind of where I'm at, and that's going to be gradual.
I don't think that's going to be the case. Actually, I'm quite.
I think it's going to stick to it
to an extent. I think it's going to be similar. The same way that if you look at parts of the game, the expanded parts, like Chapter 2, for example, is a perfect example of. Chapter 2 is a wild retelling of what actually happened in the original game. There was no Sephiroth, there was no collapsing highway, there was no
the
fight
original
at the
game,
fountain.
you run one screen, 2 screen, 3 screens, jump on a train. That's it.
Yeah.
You bump into a flower girl. That's it.
So that's that the sequence there is very, very different to what happened. But in your mind now, if you were to say, okay, what happens during Sector 8, what happens in the original game and what happens in Remake is now slightly aligned in your mind. And I think it's going to be like that when you're playing it, you're going to be like, Christ, this is really quite different. But when you sit back and actually absorb it, it's like, no, what they've done is they've just built on the existing foundations. They've not changed the story. So I absolutely, just to keep things a bit fresh and to keep people guessing and in certain circumstances, just because it's no longer appropriate to say or do certain things. There will be changes made.
Oh, definitely.
But I think the majority of I think the majority of the story is actually going to remain the same, and it'll just be retold and expanded on, and sort of presented in a sort of fresh way. And I think going back to what Toriyama has spoken about, like maybe an even better example is the Wall Market scenario of what happens in Wall Market is pretty different
Yeah,
than what happens in
substantially.
the original. But at
It's the
the end of
same
the
as
day,
well.
yeah, now when we look back, it's like it is actually the same. As we
Yeah,
remember it the same. It's two very different versions
you still
of
go
the
do your
same story.
squats. You still go to the hotel and get the stuff out of the vending machine for the materia shop guy.
Yeah,
There's just like little additional things snuck in there as well.
exactly. And
And they all add as well. That's the best bit.
exactly. And now when you go back to the original game, you're like, where the fuck's Andrea? Like,
Where's my Colosseum? I want to go
yeah,
beat some shit up.
yeah, because Andrea's now the normal thing. The Colosseum is now the normal thing. So
running through Sector 6 and getting jumped by a hell house. Like, no, no.
it's like, yes, where you come from? Just it's Don Corneo's just let him out for the day.
No, you've got to let him out now.
Yeah. So I don't anticipate that there's going to be crazy changes.
Yeah,
Um, and which is going back to why I think the end of Remake is such a red herring. Because yeah, I mean, I trust.
it does
I,
make you think. The end of Remake definitely does make you think, like, yo, well, what's going to happen now?
yeah.
Zack's
So,
alive. Sephiroth's got all this power. There's maybe two Sephiroths. What do we do? What do
yeah.
we do?
But I think a lot of people felt uncomfortable with it, myself included, because this is not the story I know.
Yeah,
But the more you play it or the more you process it, it does become the story, and the more comfortable you become. And again, I think obviously for us, this was new, it was fresh, it was all delivered to us in one go. But these guys have been working on it for 5, 6, 7 years.
yeah,
So this is a developed story where they've sat over time and made the decision of it is in our best interest as a
to do this.
business and as storytellers
Yeah,
to create this uncertainty.
yes,
Because the same way, and it's maybe not the best example, but a very good writer will know to do this, and probably the most famous is maybe like Dan Brown. If you've ever read Dan Brown's
yes,
book, like every chapter is short and every chapter ends on a cliffhanger.
yeah.
And the specific reason for that is because you
Got one or
you
two up there.
you need to know what happens next,
Yeah,
and it keeps you
keeps that
reading. So it's
momentum pushing forwards. Yeah,
and that's exactly what's kind of happened here. That they've created a degree of uncertainty that you can no longer predict what happens next. So you want to know, and it keeps you on edge.
yeah,
And it's a good way to tell a story. And I think in hindsight, once we get parts 2 and 3 and look back, and a lot of it is now familiar to us, we
it will
won't be as
fit.
upset
Yeah.
about it because we now know the answers.
See, this is it for me. I mean, one thing, like going back to episode 1 of this series with Philip. No, episode 2, sorry, with Philip. It was Baby Seal first. But
Yeah,
Philip said, like, as a creator, you don't want to imagine someone coming up to you, basically, and saying, remember that book, the Nibelheim incident that you wrote all those years ago? Do you fancy just rewriting the same thing again? You're not really going to be up for that. And it'd be the
yeah,
same thing with the developers of Remake. If you were to come to them and say, just do the same thing but make it pretty, there's not going to be any passion
yeah,
in that, but you can see the passion in the
yeah,
game. Do you know what I mean? You can see it, so you can definitely tell that these changes, while they have unnerved some people, not only are they mostly good, but they're also pretty essential to the creative process as well because we're getting a better product because of it. I think.
yeah. And I agree, and I think the whispers kind of threw a lot of people, but the whispers serve a function, and that
Yes.
function is to get to a place at the end of Remake Part One where
Got
we
no
don't know what's
idea.
happening.
Yeah. Oh my God,
And
Fate's dead.
I
Do you know
know,
what I mean? And that's where you're at.
and I think the, there's a kind of visual like once you start to unpick it and process it, and the whole thing about the whispers themselves being associated or even being the cries of the planet. Well, straight away, like, okay, well, they were there the whole time
Yep.
because there's multiple scenes in the original game where you can hear that sound, that kind of weird cat having a bone shoved up its arse. But
Oh, I heard that this morning. It kept me up.
yes,
Well, no, I know what you mean. And see, I kind of had this weird theory that the whispers, and it's not something that I kind of like. I'm not going to put a flag in the ground and say this is true, but one thing that kind of settled in my head was that the whispers are manifestations of like the live stream from the original timeline, and that's why they want to protect. And that's why when we get to the end of the game, we literally fight representations of like Loz, Kadaj, and Yazoo, because that's what the whispers are. They are literally the manifestation of the original timeline, trying to protect what they fought for, basically. Because, I mean, if you looked at the events of Final Fantasy VII and the compilation, you would assume, oh shit, that didn't go too well. Everyone's gone in 500 years. But when you actually play through it and you understand the points of, each bit of the story, you can see how they've reached that point. And it's difficult to think that they've not done the best thing at each stage, if you know what I mean. It kind of puts you in doubt now, like, well, what have we just done? We've just broke everything. And it is a
And
brilliant device because look how much we're all talking about it. Look at all the
exactly.
videos, everything like that. It's crazy.
And you kind of get into some really, it's at times it can become quite a difficult concept to wrap your head around, that
Yeah.
the live stream itself is not, time is not measured linearly, it's
Yes.
measured in memories. And a single strand of spirit energy is a memory or an experience, and the whispers themselves are spirit energy, therefore whispers are memories, and
Yeah.
therefore, the whispers themselves, they are a construct of time, but a construct of time in the live stream sense rather than how we perceive time,
Yeah.
which is why I find it such a difficult concept to wrap your head around, because we're measuring the whispers wrong.
And one possibility as well, like I've got a video going on this at the minute, so I'm not going to say too much, but what if, I mean, we have this theory going on, a few people have said it, that this Midgar that remake occurs in, that's not real, that kind of exists within the live stream. Now, if that Midgar's been created from these memories in the live stream, then people remember shit wrong. And that could account for a lot of the differences and the changes and the different character motivations that we see in
Mm.
Remake. I'm fleshing it out at the minute. I won't go on a tangent with it, but it all feeds into, like you say, this memory of the live stream. And yeah, really
Yeah,
interesting.
I
It's a
think
big rabbit hole as well.
it's. I think Viz has a very similar theory, and I personally I don't think it's wrong, but I don't like it because
Yeah,
it makes me uncomfortable, because I like the idea that this is the real characters, that this is the real Midgar.
yes.
So to suggest that the whole thing's a memory, to me,
But one thing that I'd say now is that now it is real. Like once they step into that singularity at the end of the game, and this is, see, I work in possibilities. Like I'm not gonna, like I say, I'm not putting a flag down and saying this is the theory, but they could, when they've stepped into that singularity, like the events that happen inside it could have given them actual substance and actual form, and now they're out in the real world. So yeah, it's a rabbit hole. It's
yeah.
definitely a rabbit hole.
And like I said, I'm not saying that it's
Just
wrong.
hate
I'm
it.
not, yeah, it just makes me uncomfortable, the idea.
Yeah, which it will
Um,
do because it kind of, if they're not real, what agency do they have? Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? To a certain, like, so I get where you're coming from with that. Definitely, it kind of takes all of the importance and the agency and the ramifications. Like what consequences there if they're not real?
Well,
If you know what I
when
mean?
yeah, no, absolutely, and it kind of seems such a bizarre thing to say because they are fictional characters, but
Yeah,
you know that that
real.
way, yeah. If you were presented with a group of friends and then presented with a group of clones of your friends, you're like, well, one of them's real, one of them's not, and
Don't want
I
that one.
can, yeah, I
Yeah,
can tell that they're not actually my friends. That's kind of how it makes me feel,
that one
you know.
walks a bit differently.
Yeah,
He's got a shimmy when he walks, and he never
yeah.
had that.
Cloud's get his
Oh.
pants on back to front. What's going on?
Oh, love it. But no, to see what I mean? This is how they become 2.5 hours long. This is
Yeah,
this is literally how it happens. It's me. I blame myself. So you're pretty positive about remake. To get back
definitely.
on track, you're
Yes.
positive about where things are going.
I am extremely positive about it, and I would go as far as to say it is it has become a large focal point of my life as a consumer and as a creator.
Yeah.
That I could quite easily not turn to any other form of entertainment. Final Fantasy VII is enough for me, and I love what they're doing. And I think episode intermission was a good test of that. Of here's some additional content, and I just lapped that shit up. It was great.
Yeah, to be fair, if I had a PS5, I would have been all over it immediately.
This
Oh.
is I would see if I was to tell my younger self that I would be buying books of kind of artwork with the from Japan in Japanese, even though I don't speak Japanese. I'd be like, that's stupid, that's crazy,
What are you
why are you
doing?
wasting your money? But yeah, here we are, 200 quid later. Like,
It's the only thing that stopped me is the fact that I can't actually read it. If I could read it, I'd have it. No
yeah,
questions asked. It'd be here by now. I'd have it. And it does annoy me a bit. Square have always been a bit like this with localizing things. But I get it. It's a Japanese company. It's a Japanese game. We're always going to be bottom of the pile, pretty much. But come on, please.
well, having said that, fair play to them that they're actually translating
Yeah.
the materials Ultimania. I mean, that one's a bit easier because there's far less text in it
Yes. It's a lot more
than in
visual.
the
Yeah.
original. Um,
But we like Traces of Two Past.
yeah, well, that'll be out sometime
Eventually.
next year,
Yeah.
I expect, because it obviously took them quite a while to translate On the Way to a Smile and The Kids Are All Right,
Yeah.
but they got there, and then I think the big what they've obviously learned their lesson with Remake, because Picturing the Past was released in English as part of the World Preview
Yeah.
book, and that came out less than 6 months after Remake was released. So
so it's a lot more timely than it used to be. Definitely, much more timely. And I suppose that's a benefit of, like we were talking about earlier, this more connected world that we live in now. It's just easier to do stuff.
Yeah, so I would expect Traces of Two Past to be out in English some point next year, because they know they can.
Oh, it'll sell. I'll buy a copy immediately.
So I mean, again, my wee Japanese copy will just be sitting going,
Read me.
what am I meant to do now?
I actually did start toying with the idea of trying to learn Japanese just so that I could do it, but I think I've reached that age now where my brain's just like, mate, you ain't learning shit. When you reach that age and your brain's just like, mate, you can't even remember what you had for dinner 2 days ago. Stop.
Yeah, just please leave this to an adult. Like,
oh, can't learn new things now. Go away.
yeah, I mean that's sort of the weird situation you find yourself in, that you're prepared to learn Japanese just to read a book.
Just won't stick. It's a lot to take on as well. Like, I wish they'd done it in school. Like, if Japanese had been an option when I was in school, I think we had French and Spanish, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
Spanish, fair enough, it's quite a global language, but French? Come on.
Yeah. Why would I need to read Final Fantasy VII in French?
I know, God.
What are you thinking?
Japan, man, not France. Oh, love it. Now, moving on to the next question. This one's a tough one as well. I feel bad when I ask everyone this one. There's a lot of music in the Final Fantasy VII compilation. A lot of music. Is there a track that kind of stands out to you more than any other? Or is that just, oh, let's go. That's a quick, confident answer. Everyone else has sat there like, oh, shit.
It was, but it's because I've had the benefit of listening to the same question.
Don't tell people. Don't tell people.
Sorry, just edit this bit out. It's I would have to say the track that stands out for me is You Can Hear the Cries of the Planet, from the original game, and it's that kind of haunting music.
I've used it in a couple of vids recently. It's like every time I start playing it, it's like chills. Come on.
I could listen to that on repeat for quite some time. Weirdly enough, I'm not. I like the version that appears in Remake at the Edge of Creation, but I'm not an enormous fan of it. I actually still prefer the original, just because it does have that real kind of haunting vibe. And I think it, in retrospect, I think the reason I like it so much is because when you play the game for the first time and you don't know what's coming next, it has such a profound impact on
Where
you
that
that,
music hit, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
oh.
So it becomes, you know that way people ask you, where were you when Michael Jackson died, or where were you when the planes hit the Twin Towers, or where were you when you first heard You Can Hear the Cries of the Planet?
I think it was at my nana's actually. I
Yeah.
took my PlayStation.
So that's over the years. That's why I think it's affected me the way it has. So
Yeah.
I love Seven's soundtrack. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I would maybe go put my neck on the line here, and God help me, but
Danger.
I actually prefer Eight's soundtrack
Oh
to
yeah.
Seven's.
I think production and quality wise and things like that, Eight's music was insanely good because it's
Yeah.
like they learned the lessons. Because when they were doing Seven, I very much think they were approaching the music still from a SNES. They knew what they were capable of on the SNES. Let's push it a little bit and see if the PS1 can go a bit further. And then when 8 came around, it was like, let's fucking go. We know what
Yeah.
this can do now. Let's have it. And yeah, so I think that's why 8 definitely stood out a lot more musically. So good.
It was yeah, some of my favourite Final Fantasy tracks come from it.
Yeah.
And it's
I love the
it's
Sorceress's theme in 8.
yeah. And
It's so good.
the Seed one as well. The dun, 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 dun.
Yes.
That's a
How bad
fucking
it is.
banger.
Is that? No, that's at
No,
Balen.
yeah, it's Blonde Garden. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
Galbadia's is good as well because it's the same sort of thing but a more militaristic take on it, innit? Yeah. Oh, I love
yeah.
8. I'm so glad that you love 8. No one loves
But
8. No one appreciates 8.
I know. Well, do you know what? Like I
The
said,
ugly child of the PS1 era.
I co-authored a Final Fantasy VIII novel that basically covers the start of the game up to the Seed graduation, and that got commissioned by Alex Main, the kind of lead organizer of KupoCon, because eight's his favourite as well, and he was just like, I don't want any more books unless it's an 8 book. Well, yeah,
That's it. You
let's,
write about 8.
let's do it.
Oh, I think it's underrated personally. It doesn't get the love that it deserves. It's weird, yes.
Yeah,
I
and
honestly think they should have leaned into the Squall is Dead theory because it makes the narrative make a lot more sense. Like it's some weird fucking pre-death fever dream or something like that.
yeah,
I really like that theory. Like I remember reading it when I was about, I think it was about 20 something like that because there was a whole website like ff8squallisdead.com. Just there reading through it, like, yo, this makes all the sense. I think it's just the conspiracy theorist in me.
yeah, and
Tinfoil hat.
no, like there's nothing about it that's wildly inaccurate, particularly when like if you ever actually look at the stages of the brain as the brain is dying and
Yeah,
is deprived of oxygen, and the things that happen to the brain and in terms of hallucination and all that jazz,
makes
like
sense.
time compression right at the end after Artemisia is defeated, that is
The final moments.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I mean, I'm kind of half glad that they debunked it because it's grim. But I
yeah,
also think it would have been a really powerful story as well.
yeah,
Like, but still, I mean, I enjoy it. It gets weird. It definitely jumps the shark multiple times, but I like it.
yeah. As I say, it's a great love story. The whole
Yes.
it's the whole kind of fate element, I think,
Yes.
is what drew me to it. I mean, when you try and explain it to people, it seems a bit fucking weird. Like, his dad and her ma loved each other, but it didn't happen, so now he loves her. It's like,
Is that? I love how full blown you went with it then. Perfect.
it's,
But no, oh, I hate that narrative as well. Oh, the brother and sister, the brother and sister. Like, shut up.
yeah,
Shut up and get off the internet immediately.
yeah, just what
Oh,
kind of biology were you learning at school, brother and sister?
oh no, no, but yeah, I'm a fan of 8. I rate 8. I
So
definitely rate 8. I'm a bit bitter if this Final Fantasy IX remake turns out to be true. Where's the love for my boy Final Fantasy VIII?
Nah, that's true. Well, to be fair, they did remaster it recently, so.
Ah, Nine got one of them as well.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
I thought it was just 8.
I don't
Was
know.
it not?
Did they remaster it or did they just port it
I think they
with
ported it
9?
to Steam and sort of upgraded or just sharpened the images rather than properly
Yeah,
remaster it.
because
But
8 got an actual, like, oh my god, Squall's face is made of 7 pixels, quick fix it.
yeah,
Yeah. Which it
um,
needed, in fairness. It definitely needed.
yeah, definitely, it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Except when you compare them to some of the other students, and you're like, right, well, why does
Why
Squall
have you
look
not
great,
fixed
but
them?
I that guy's legs going the wrong way?
Leans into the Squall is dead theory, maybe.
Yeah, good point. Actually, right at the end when all the faces start warping,
Oh,
it's
that is a horrifying shot, that moment when, like, you've just got the hole in the middle of Squall's face. Like,
yeah,
Jesus.
that's
I really
that's
need to
one.
play it again. I do need to play it again. I've not played it for a while. I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
But to answer your question,
Yeah,
yes.
music, shit.
I mean, kind of special shout out, I think,
Yeah, honourable mentions.
to Sid's theme. I do love Sid's theme.
Yes! God, I love you.
That's one of my favourites, and
Not the first version that you get either. The second version, the slightly more acoustic version that you get. Yeah,
a lot. I love both. Actually,
oh yeah, I'm a big fan of both. But what's it called now? Into
sending a dream into the universe.
that's it. So good. Oh god, I
Yeah,
love that.
that's definitely it's definitely my favourite of the theme musics.
Oh, like the character themes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I like the live stream. The thing that's called Flow of the live stream is the one that plays at the observatory. You know when Bugenhagen's doing
Yeah, yeah.
his show.
Oh, yes, I know which one you mean. Yeah, yeah. It's, yeah, and there's so many little different variations of them as well throughout the game and stuff like that. It's something that they did a lot in Final Fantasy VI as well, from what I've noticed. Like, you get a I think the biggest example of it is in the ending of the game. Depending on how things have panned out, you kind of get like certain characters come together. So there's a moment where I think it's Celes and Locke kind of come together at last, and the music that plays is a merging of their two individual character themes, just kind of merged into one. It's so good, so
Yeah,
good, and yeah, I just love it. I love it. I'm looking forward to the music in Remake as well
yeah,
because like some of it's not as good as the original versions. I'm with you. In some cases, I definitely prefer the original versions, whether that's fact or nostalgia or whatever it is just where I'm at.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. But I think overall, remakes. My God, what a soundtrack that is.
The
That
Genova
is,
fight for me.
yeah.
So,
Genova Fight's amazing. I love the song Advent, the one that plays when I think when the singularity really kind of starts messing up and
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I know that one.
that's a beauty of a tune. Um, and you know, obviously, like everybody else, love the Airbuster. I love the one that plays
Airbuster's real good.
when you fight Ghoul as well. That's a great track.
Oh, do you mean in the train graveyard?
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
like that one.
And I think my favourite of the new tracks is Midnight Rendezvous, the one that see when you first enter Sector 6.
Yep. That's six made
That
of the channel. Ooh.
true.
Yeah, no, I know which one you mean. Is that
I
just
just
before? Is it just before you get to the playground?
no. It's as soon as you walk through the passageway
Oh,
at the
just
beginning
as
of chapter 9,
right.
and it kind of it stops playing when you actually get to the collapsed expressway,
Yeah.
but it's a kind of really soft melodic tune. Just totally on a tangent there. Just when you said that about your name, I when I was putting the kids to bed before we actually started speaking, my son asked me who was coming to speak with, and without thinking because I was distracted, I said Jesus from Sector 6. What?
Love it. Love it. That's
What?
it now.
What does that even mean?
What are these words, Daddy? What are these words? are you drinking, Father?
So yeah, so it was when I saw it was quite funny. So there you go. That when I was saying to you earlier about how Final Fantasy VII has impacted my life. So it started off with talking about spirituality, and here I am speaking to Jesus. So
Oh, love it.
what a
What a
life
journey.
path this
What
has
a
been.
journey.
Right?
What a journey. Oh, we could get an anime out of that. Oh, right. So we're getting into the back end of things now. These are the fun questions.
Yes, can't
So,
wait.
are you prepared? Are you prepared for these?
I am as prepared as I'm going to be.
Love it. So the first one is this one's pretty easy to be fair. It's like, what are you hoping for the future of Final Fantasy VII Remakes, or what do you want to see going forwards?
I would effectively like to see more of the same. I know
Yeah,
that there's been mixed opinions about the first installment, but I think remake and what remake delivered, and again what intermission delivered,
yes,
shows that, or at least to me from a storytelling perspective, that they absolutely know what they're doing.
yeah,
So it's, they're not just delivering a great playable game. This is basically, it's ticking all the boxes nostalgia wise for me, from a narrative perspective. And the same thing that I've kind of said this to quite a few people before, that this is, or playing remake for the first time, left me utterly speechless at certain moments, because it gave me a feeling that I hadn't experienced since childhood, and the
yes,
feeling was literally, it felt like you were going home. It felt like
yes.
you were going back to family and friends. That sort of safety and security. Um, and I never ever thought I would be able to kind of feel that way again, or experience that. It was quite powerful actually. Um, but I personally think they've done a phenomenal job. I like the balance that they have between expanding on existing content and implementing compilation, because
Yeah,
that's kind of that's my thing. I love the compilation stuff.
yeah.
So I love to see all the
It
interesting
definitely
ways.
takes a deft touch to weave all of this together in a way that works, and so far, smashed it.
Well, as someone who wrote a retelling of Final Fantasy VII and stuck in as much compilation stuff as they possibly could, I know fine well how difficult it can be at
Yeah.
times, and I've loved the way that they've done it here. And I'm not, without uh, tooting my own trumpet.
Oh,
There are quite a lot of similarities between what I wrote and what's
hey.
in the. Um, but to me, is that's not because there's
They've
they've
been watching.
plagiarized my ideas.
No,
And
this is it. I think it's the same sort of thing with a lot of us theory crafters. There's always going to be convergence because you're working from the same core
yeah,
material. Yeah,
that's exactly it. It seems like the logical thing to do
yeah,
at times. So it makes sense that the same. And one example would be like in the original game when the party's escaping from the pillar,
yeah.
like they swing from a wire, but that's not how physics works.
No, no, it is not. For that wire to be long enough to reach into there, they would have smashed into the ground after about 10 seconds.
Yeah, but exactly. But
Oh.
as soon as the tension goes, like when the plate collapses,
Yeah,
like, right, hold on a second, like whatever this is connected to is currently plummeting towards the earth. How the fuck are you still swinging
I'm
from it?
gonna die.
Yeah. So to actually have the kind of zip line is exactly what I had
Yeah,
in my version of the book. So, but again, that just makes sense.
yeah, exactly.
How do you retell that kind of as close as possible?
Just a
But
hook
from,
on a rope.
yeah,
Whee!
do you know what I mean? It might have been a for all,
Cloud just sat on Barrett's head.
yeah, literally for all the sense it made, they might as well have floated down with an umbrella. Do you know, like,
Mary Poppins and
yeah,
shit, bro.
yes. So,
I'm Mary Poppins, yeah.
uh,
Oh,
like more of the same for me.
yeah,
Like I think they've done an amazing job. I like the changes that they've made.
Yep.
As long as they don't change the major story beats,
Yeah.
and even if they did,
As long as it
I,
makes sense and
yeah.
works. Yeah.
And what I've kind of learned over time is that when Advent Children came out, I didn't really like it at first,
Yeah.
because it changed the story and characters that I knew, and then when Dirge of Cerberus came out, I didn't really like it at first because it changed the story and characters I knew, and same with Crisis Core and Before Crisis. And
With Advent Children, had you already read what was it that came before it? Now it was On the Way to a Smile, wasn't it? That's
on
kind of
the way
set
to
in
on
between.
yeah, On the Way to a Smile didn't come before it though.
Did it not come out before it? No.
I've
Because I'm not
I
sure on this. I didn't even know On the Way to a Smile existed or anything like that until a good 3 or 4 years after it. Because where you were part of the community, I wasn't really. I was very much just a fan who appreciated.
it's possible that the Denzel chapter and
Right.
maybe the Tifa chapter had been released in Japan
But nothing
at
over
at the
here.
same
Yeah.
time as the DVD, but it took a couple of years before the English version was released. And again, it was Denzel and Tifa and possibly Barrett was released as
Yeah.
part of the Blu-ray.
And then
But
what
we're
is it?
talking,
Is it Black and White that came later?
yeah. So
Yeah.
Yuffie's chapter, Nanaki's chapter, Black and White, and the Shinra chapters came as part of the Japanese book, but the Japanese book was released. We're talking 7 or 8 years before it was officially translated into English.
This is what I mean as well. Advent Children, I think, would have benefited from a lot of that information being, like with you saying that you didn't really enjoy it. Like, was that because of the narrative kind of differences, like you were saying, with the characters and things like that?
Yeah, and it was more. Um, I guess it was change. It was like, well,
Yeah.
this isn't Final Fantasy VII anymore.
What's going on
And
here?
yeah, and then you obviously watch it a couple of times, and okay, well, this is now part of what my understanding of Final Fantasy VII is,
Yeah.
and you make your peace with it, and then you
Yeah.
can enjoy it for what it is. And the same thing with Dirge of Cerberus, the same thing with Crisis Core.
Yeah.
That it took a little bit of time to come to terms with. Okay, this
What
is
was
what the
going
story
on?
now is.
Yeah.
And once I had sort of crossed that
Same as with
bridge.
Remake as well.
Well, that's exactly
Yeah, for a few
the
days.
point. So
Yeah.
once I made my peace with the changes that had been made,
Yeah.
it now seems part of the compilation, and I love it.
Yeah.
But there definitely seems to be, every time I encounter a new part of the compilation, I have to process
Yeah.
these changes, and I expect the same thing to happen with future installments. That whatever they
it's a big indication of like how impactful and important the game is, though, because like that's why you have to process to these things. Do you know what I mean? Because, and I think that's why, like I was saying earlier about the 80-20 split kind of thing. I think that's where the 20 are kind of sat. Like they cannot reconcile the changes in their mind and their kind of perspective on the compilation or their perspective on Seven, and it's a shame. Like it is a shame.
Yeah, and I agree, and I feel awful for those who, for whatever reason, have not been able to enjoy it, because it does feel as if you've been kind of robbed of your childhood
Yeah.
a little bit. So I love it because it gave me part of my childhood back.
Yeah.
But equally, I can understand why people did not feel that way for whatever reason. And I'm devastated for them, because effectively, to have something that you love spoiled, that's not cool. So, and I mentioned obviously at the beginning of the show that I've listened to everyone that you've spoken to already, and I thought Ray was amazing. I really enjoyed Ray's conversation, and I could listen to Baby Seal forever. But I really enjoyed Red Mage.
Yes.
Because the points that he was putting across were constructive criticism and absolutely valid.
Measured as well. Yeah.
But he was coming at it from an entirely different angle to what I come at it.
Yeah.
So it was massively interesting to kind of respect his opinion, not necessarily agree with all of it, but
Yeah.
respect his opinion because everything he was saying was totally valid and well thought out.
And this is one of the
Uh,
things me and him were talking earlier today, and it's like just because we have different opinions on things doesn't mean we don't talk to each other anymore. And it seems that's becoming more and more of a thing these days, and it's depressing to be honest with you. Like I've had so many different opinions to people, like my friends over the years, but you don't fall out with them over it. Do you know what I mean? It's just weird. It's very weird.
yeah.
Echo chambers and things like that.
Well, that's it. I actually think part of the problem is social media,
Yeah,
that the algorithms are designed to only show you things that you want to see.
yeah.
So when somebody challenges that, you don't really know what to do.
No.
So you react in a kind of aggressive manner.
Ah.
Or is that just me?
I see.
Uh,
I've got a bit of a weird perspective on it because I'm into my footy, obviously, and I run a football banter page on Facebook, which is like 20,000 people have got on it, all different fans of like Liverpool, Everton, United, City, and we go at each other sometimes, but then we'll all just chat normally as well. So we'll disagree
mhm.
on a subject. Obviously, there's people that go too far. There always is in these groups, but like I think because I've come from that kind of background on social media, and that's been the main focus of a lot of my social media, I just see people and just kind of like, oh, okay, carry on with my day. Like, oh, we have a different opinion. That's fine. But then I find people
And
getting offended at me for having a different opinion. It's like, come on, chill.
yeah, it seems bizarre, but
I am abrasive. I'll give them
I mean,
that.
yeah,
I'm an abrasive mank. Can't be
yeah.
helped.
Having spent 2 hours in your company, I can see that. But I'm just
Right.
kidding.
No, no,
I'm
that's
just
it.
kidding. This has been easy because we agree on everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Most likely.
um, but no, I found social media quite bizarre at times
Yeah.
for that reason. I've
Very
learned the
much a
hard way.
double-edged kind of thing.
Yeah,
It gives us this tool and this ability to do what we do. Same time, there's a lot of negatives.
yeah. So I mean, people will be people. I think that's the problem.
Comes down to tribalism as well in a lot of ways. It's kind of built into us. I mean, I suppose you can be aware of it and try and work against it and that sort of thing, but it's human nature to a certain degree, and
Yeah,
you can't really fight that, which is a shame, but it is what it is.
yeah, absolutely. I don't, I think as we all get older and realise what we are willing and not willing to tolerate,
Yes.
uh, social media becomes a bit of a fucking minefield.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I definitely take far less shit than I used to. Like I used to just let it breeze over me, whereas now I'll just be like, "Excuse me, what? Go away."
yeah, I actually very rarely engage. If I see something that somebody has said that I don't agree with, it's just right. You've irritated me. So the worst thing I could possibly do to you is ignore you.
Oh no, I have to. I find recently that like when I first started this journey with Twitter and everything, I was just going at people like, "Oh no, you're full of shit." No, I wasn't saying it like that, but you know what I mean. I was like, "Oh, I disagree. I think this," and people don't like that.
No.
People really don't like that. So I've just now when I see an opinion, I kind of look at the account first. It's like, is this someone I know? Are they going to spit the dummy if I say a different opinion? And most of the time, I just end up thinking, I've thought about this for too long now. I'm not even going to bother replying. I'm going to carry on with my
Yeah.
scroll.
I think yeah, it seems to affect people and what their understanding of their space is.
Yes.
In Facebook, for example, if you posted something in your wall and somebody came into your comments and started saying something that's very different to you
Yes.
going onto their page and
Yes.
starting an argument sort of thing. So there's a little bit of um, etiquette that
Yeah.
goes with that.
I think
Twitter's a
I
nightmare
think with
though.
Twitter as well, yeah, because it is literally there for the purpose of broadcasting to everybody.
Yeah.
That is the
So
point of it. So when you make a comment like that and someone comes in with a different opinion, you're like, "Oh, well, excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" It's like, "Well, I'm having a conversation with you."
yeah, and well, yeah, people react as if you've just walked into their front room and shouted. You know.
Punch the nan.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
it is a minefield, but we navigate it. We navigate it. Right, here we go. This is the fun one now. This is the one. So what I want you to do, and what I've asked everyone to do, is make one prediction One prediction about something that you're reasonably confident about that is going to happen in the future of Remake. Not going to pin you into a box or anything like that and kind of say, I want you to tell me if Zach's alive or any pish like that. Just whatever you're confident on.
I'm fairly confident that uh, some of the translation issues are going to be addressed to the point where we'll get to see uh, what things we're supposed to read as or supposed to sound as. And there's a few
So you
things in
mean from the
particular that
OG?
yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, yeah,
and this is something that really came to the forefront of my mind when I was writing the Norse myths book.
yeah.
Um, Probably the best example could be the Midgard Zolom. Midgard Zolom should actually have been Midgard Storm,
Yeah,
which is the world serpent
yeah.
from Norse mythology, and is also well, actually, it wasn't called Midgard Storm in the original Final Fantasy VI. It was only later, but there's uh,
Oh yeah, because there is one that. Yeah, yeah,
I think it was only a later release that the Midgard Storm was added to. Um, but it's one of these things where when you start to look at the mythology, and Midgard is very clearly derived from Midgard,
yeah.
which is the world of men in Norse mythology, and Nibelheim is very clearly derived from
Niflheim.
Niflheim, which
Yeah.
is the underworld in Norse mythology. So to have those connections and then have a giant snake, which is quite a big part of Norse mythology, so close to the city,
Yep.
and then make a mega mess of its name. But the actual, and again, this comes down to the translation of it, because in the original Japanese it was Midgarstorm.
Yep.
It's just
When you
the
bring
sort
it
of
back.
the phonetics
Yeah.
of kind of caused the translators to stick in as
There's so many like that
Midgarzolm.
as well in the original. Like the main one I can think of, the Xenogears reference. So when Cloud's in his wheelchair and he's kind of starts mumbling incoherently, and he says something about it's literally a line directly from Xenogears, but it's kind of translated as Xenogeis in the original
Oh
game.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
right.
that's a reference to the upcoming Xenogears game, and it just got completely lost in the original game. Gone.
Yeah. So things like that, I'm looking forward to them addressing. So my actual prediction is that they'll fix a lot of this, and it'll. I'm
Clarify things.
I'm pretty sure it'll happen anyway, but it'll really help me in terms of just sort of validating
Yep,
a lot of what I've been talking about. Um, but the big thing for me, and you know, I don't recall anyone sticking their necks out to in terms of what's going to happen with Aerith,
here we go, son.
right? But
Let's go. To
so
be fair, I've stuck my neck out a few times on the Aerith one,
yeah,
but not on this series. So yeah, I think you are the first.
so the kind of what I've been talking about leads into this, right? So I think a lot of the mythology stuff is going to be picked up and referenced so that there's a bit more clarity on where the larger themes came from, and particularly how Norse mythology and sort of Judeo-Christian mysticism play into things.
Yeah,
But one of the big things in Norse mythology is fate,
yeah,
right? And particularly that you cannot escape fate. Like one's destiny and fate as a whole are not necessarily the same thing.
yeah.
Like so the destination remains the same, but the journey can be different. Like if someone says to you, you're fated to die in the battlefield, which battle, which location, who kills you, all
Is
of
it an
that can
actual
change.
battlefield or a metaphorical battlefield?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the outcome is the same, but the manner of the how you get there can change,
Yes.
right? So this is quite an important concept in Norse mythology, which leads to Ragnarok,
Yep.
which is the apocalypse, right?
Last party time.
The the entire point is that you cannot escape
Yep.
your fate. And I think what happens at the end of Remake about fate being defeated is the red herring.
Yep. Because fate ain't
Because
defeated.
because fate has not been defeated.
Yep.
Fate, I think Aerith is fated to die in order to save the planet.
Yep.
So the specific details might change, but my big takeaway from a mythological point of view is that Aerith will still die.
Yep.
Because and the entire point of or not the entire point, but some of the point of making a big fuss about fate being defeated is to present this idea that maybe she won't.
She can live.
But that doesn't tie in with the mythology and the themes behind.
And the necessity to a certain degree as well, because I mean, you could also argue that if Aerith isn't a part of the live stream, she can't connect with it in the same way, and therefore cannot defend the planet as she does. So yeah, it could be a mechanical thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on the surface of it, that definitely seems to be the case.
Yep.
I think if they really wanted to, they could probably find a way to get around that story wise. But my big prediction of something that I'm very confident is going to happen is that having studied mythology and having compared mythology and having looked at what has influenced Najima,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that the theme of you cannot escape your fate will remain.
Coming back.
And,
yeah.
And Aerith is going to
not again.
Kick the bucket.
Please not again. No, but I mean, I've been saying this for quite a while. Like, I mean, they're going to make us think that she's going to survive and everything's going to be fine, but it's going to come to a point. I think she'll survive longer. I don't think it'll happen earlier. I think it'll happen later. Because, I mean, if it's going to be a 3-part game series, they want to keep everything, at least so that she appears in the last game, potentially.
I personally don't think it'll be 3 parts. I think it'll be a minimum
4?
of 4.
Yeah. And see, this is why I think there's going to be changes, because I think they're going to shoot for 3. If they go to 4, I agree with you completely on like how it's going to pan out, and it'll hit each of the main spots, and the story will remain pretty unchanged, just expanded. I don't know. I've just got a weird feeling they're going to shoot for 3, and if they do that, then there will have to be changes, I think. But who knows?
I seem to. I'm under the impression from the developers that they see this as their big last hurrah.
Yeah.
And realistically, it's going to take several years for them to do. I don't think they would rush anything. I don't think they would cram everything into
a third.
Yeah. Because Midgar, the story of Midgar is not a third of. I mean, obviously with the PlayStation 5 advancements, there's the capacity to actually have a much larger game.
Oh, definitely.
But whether or not they would do that is totally different, because
Nomura himself has said that they want to get these games, they want to strike the balance between getting them out quick, but having a respectably sized amount of content in the game. So they've been thinking about it themselves. Yeah. It is definitely an interesting one. It's weird to think that the amount of games that they're going to break it up into could sort of dictate which way the story's going to go in a lot of cases. It's crazy.
So if they wanted to remain the same size as Part 1, ending at Junon or ending at the cargo ship is a fair place. If they actually want to make it larger and have more but keep it relatively similar scale, ending at Nibelheim would be a good place to stop, right?
Yeah.
But then you're talking about, well, getting to Nibelheim, how do you fit everything else into the third story?
You get around, don't you? You do get around. It's tough because narratively, Nibelheim makes the most sense for as a conclusion point for the next part. Where would you think there'd be a natural stopping point before that? Like the boat?
Before Nibelheim, I think a natural stopping point based on the story as is would be the cargo ship.
Yeah.
Because
like before you get into Costa del Sol. Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of because that's the whole thing about you actually encounter Sephiroth again, you encounter Genova. You've already been able to expand or introduce the world map, but on a
Rufus
single
is there
continent.
as well, so you could work some sort of scene in with Rufus as well, definitely.
And then having the game or the next game open in Costa del Sol
And then
makes.
Nibelheim works.
I actually think that if they're going to expand the story to a bit, they're probably going to start and end at Nibelheim in part 2.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably finish part 3 at the Northern Crater and the summoning
Yeah.
of.
The weapons and everything like that. Yeah.
And then part 4 is the rest of it.
Yeah. Run to the end.
That's
Yeah, because if you
how
think
I
about
think.
it, this 3 on the OG was empty, realistically. It was literally just the end of the game. You could run around
Yeah.
everywhere, but it's a 2 disc game, realistically.
Well, that's it. And but effectively, after the Northern Crater, as much as we remember that, or when we look back, it seems like quite a long game. It's not really, because after the Northern Crater, it's effectively finding Cloud, then doing the huge materia
Yeah.
missions, then going to the Forgotten Capital
Get the key to the
to
ancient, share
yeah,
all that sort of business.
and
And then
then
Diamond
it's the
Weapon.
Midgar scenario.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's not an enormous amount of story.
That's a fair point, actually, because, yeah, a lot of the times, like, my runs always end up stupidly long, but that's because I do dumb shit, like go breed a gold chocobo, and, I literally do everything. When I do a run, it's like, I respect all these speedrunners who kill the game in 7 hours, like Caleb and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Because I want to just go and do stuff. I want to go
Yeah.
and play. Oh, have fun. Do you know what I mean? I've got all materials to master.
Yeah. And that's that I think that's the kind of the thing about disc 2 in particular, that the story is not massive. It's
Yeah,
what you can do
yeah.
as side missions that take up the time. So
Yeah, because you've got like the battle arena and everything like that, haven't you? And secret areas like the Gelnica and the ancient forest. Like, there's so much to do. But yeah, you could ignore all of it and
so
just go straight to the end.
I mean, it's not impossible that they do it over 3, but I would be extremely surprised, because
Yeah,
I think there's too much excitement, and it's too relevant right now to justify them leaving it another couple of years,
yeah,
by extending the game. And again, from a narrative perspective, there's every reason to start and end in Nibelheim,
yeah. It
because
just makes sense.
it's its own story arc.
Yeah,
Particularly because if they're already introducing the kind of compilation content, the actual backstory to Calm, is that the town was bombed and
but
rebuilt and
it's
populated.
the same as
So,
Nibelheim, basically.
well,
Yeah,
that's exactly it. So if you then have part 2 open with the Nibelheim flashback,
and
and then
then
introduce the Calm story,
yeah,
only
it'd
for
be
it.
interesting to see if we actually get any kind of explanation. Because in the OJ, nothing, literally
Well,
nothing.
yeah, and I think it would make a lot of sense to plant the seed at Calm
Yes,
for it to come to fruition when they
yes,
eventually come back to Nibelheim and be like, well, what is going on here? Oh my god, this reminds us of what was happening in Calm, sort of thing. That's a good story arc. That's a beginning, middle, end for that part of the game. The same way
yes.
that Remake Part 1 has its own story arc. And like the end of um when you go back to Nibelheim,
Yes.
you find out that Sephiroth is uh first of all, he talks about Genova being the calamity from the sky, and then
Yeah.
starts talking a little bit more about the black materia.
Hooks you up with some destruct material.
Exactly. So if this
Floats
guy
off.
just throws a ball in your face,
I'm that dickhead.
uh, so it's disturbing the ambience of the library. Um, so it makes sense for them to sort of learn, okay, well, what is the black material? What's
Yeah.
he searching for? What's this all about? And then for that story arc to end
Cliffhanger.
with the black materia being given to the real Sephiroth, meteors summoned, and I think sort of Baby Seal. When I first spoke to Baby Seal about this, I assumed that one of the games was going to end after Aerith's death, and he pointed out that from a narrative perspective that doesn't make sense because the sense of loss isn't really going to be there the way that in the original game
Oh yeah, it carries
Aerith
on
dies.
with you. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not that you need to wait to put in disc two. It's the sense of loss is there immediately.
instant. Oh, the way the music its theme just plays through that fight with Genova.
So it's like when you move on to disc two and you kind of go up to the snowfields and there's just this, there's literally a gaping hole in your party. Um, and you wouldn't be able to feel that way, or you wouldn't be able to recapture that if you ended part of the remake once she dies, because
Yeah,
it
because you've
just
got
means that,
months, you've got years then.
yeah. So a few years later, you pick up the story.
Oh
She's
yeah, she
not part of
dead.
the party anymore. Okay, we'll just go on with it. So the sense of loss is totally missing.
Yeah,
But I think I think just the way that this kind of summoning of Meteor makes a lot of sense, because that is a massive cliffhanger.
yeah,
Touched on the fact that Cloud gets lost. There's
yeah.
revelations, or kind of semi revelations about Cloud's past.
Everyone
You
gets
know,
captured.
everything's gone to shit, and
Yeah.
then Tifa wakes
Weapons
up.
getting about.
Yeah, Tifa wakes up a week later in Junon.
Yeah,
So there's a sort of natural break there,
yeah. You could easily
um,
start the next one right there. Yeah.
and just use that sequence to kind of recap everything that's going on. So, and
Can't
of
wait to
of
see
course,
Kate Sith dressed up
you
as a
know,
reporter.
yeah.
Horrible,
So
horrible.
that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it makes most sense
Yeah,
narratively to do it that way. I mean, there's plenty of scope to do it other ways, and I've full faith in them that no matter how they choose to do it, that it will make
yeah,
sense.
definitely.
Um,
Coming back to the Aerith thing as well, there's a lot more evidence that even in the original game she was meant to survive longer, or maybe not meant to survive, but they were toying with the prospects because she's got dialogue lines in
yeah.
after the snowboarding. What's it called? Icicle
Well,
that area.
It's Icicle Inn or the Great Glacier.
The Great
But
Glacier, that's it. What do you see what I mean? I'm getting old and my brain's falling off. But like she's got cut dialogue there, so there was always the possibility that they were thinking, oh, she'll survive a bit later. And I kind of feel like whatever the original plan was for Aerith, that's what they're going to go with this time, so that she'll survive a bit longer. And I personally think it'll be like at the North Crater or something like that. Now, I think the best way to do it, like you were saying, if you kill her and then you have a 2 year break until the next game, I think it could very much be more of a mysterious thing. So like in the same way that Cloud just disappears at that point, same thing
mhm.
could happen to Aerith. She just disappears at that point, and then I'm not a skilled writer. I'm sure they can figure something out, but you know what I mean. It plays out from there. But yeah, I'm with you on the Aerith thing,
Yeah.
100%. Like we
One of
want
the
her to
things that,
live. Everyone wants
yeah,
her to live, but ain't gonna happen.
it's very possible that rather than the suggestion being that she's outright being killed, that the suggestion is that you know if the planet is able to trap Sephiroth in the singularity, then it would make sense that Aerith could also be trapped somewhere
Yep.
and therefore can't activate Holy, or can't command the live stream, or what have you. So the twist could be that yes, she does die, but she's now trapped.
And she can't do what she needs to do. Yep.
Um, so I mean, there's lots of different ways that they can handle it.
So I kind of feel like
Um,
you're in the same sort of range as me with thinking this is going to get really dark as we get towards the end of it. Like I've got a feeling that this is going to get super dark. It'll end
yeah,
reasonably nice, I think. When we get to the end, some people will be happy, but I think there's going to be
yeah,
some grim shit.
yeah, I think in order, like the overall outcome will be a positive one,
Yeah,
because I don't think they could have a AAA game and not
yeah.
have a positive one.
Especially not with
Um,
this being like the definitive end of Seven as
yeah,
well. Yeah,
but I agree that the in order to get there, in order to have a satisfying ending, things have to get far worse
Yep.
before they get better. To the point where I don't think
Hopelessness. Yeah.
I actually expect that they'll allow a meteor to hit the planet. And
I'll be up for
you
that.
know, whatever, because it'll be one of these situations where you
Sephiroth's
know.
got all that power and it's being amassed, and oh yes.
But I
There's your
also
boss
think that
fight, boys. Let's go.
the it seems like a weird thing to go back to, but like if you look at Thanos' theory in uh, Infinity War
Yeah,
about in order to save half the universe, you have to sacrifice the other half. So if we know that humans are extinct within 500 years on the planet,
yeah.
how do you save humanity? You sacrifice half to save the other half,
So
and
meteor hit. Yeah,
that story's already been told in Shadowbringers. So I
yeah,
mean, they've already touched on it. So
yeah.
why not do the same thing with this, that they allow Meteor to hit, wipe out a fair chunk of humanity in order to save the rest?
It'd be such a dark story that. I'd be 100% up for it. Like, I think that could be really good, and I do think it needs to go that route. Like, I think it'll still have those moments of brevity and entertainment and happy. Like Seven was a really quirky game, and I think we will still get a lot of those moments throughout it. But I think on the whole, yeah, we are leaning into a pretty dark, almost what I almost want to say what people were expecting from 13 Verses. Remember that
Eh,
original 13 Verses? To look at it and
yeah,
how dark and gritty, and I kind of
yeah,
feel like that could be the way we're going.
it's certainly possible. I personally, I, I think, I think there still will be this. The issue that Final Fantasy VII had was it
Yeah.
dealt with some really dark themes, but obviously it was limited in scope with
Yes.
how do you tell this story with Lego characters?
Best
And
Lego characters.
when they had, but they had to kind of also keep in mind the fact that this was a video game that, and at that time, video games were not marketed to adults; they were marketed to kids. So
Yeah.
how do you include that story in what effectively on a broader scale is a story for kids? You include humor, you include jokes, and you have the darker themes
Yeah.
lingering in the background that adults might understand,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily. And that's one of the
Not
beauties of Final
glaringly
Fantasy.
obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, the older you get, the more you realise how important the story is. But there's
Yeah.
an awful lot of stuff that you missed as a kid.
Yes.
Like, just the Genova project itself. Like that's massively serious.
Ojo's a naughty boy, man.
Yeah. But I mean the whole concept of you know genetically modified children and soldiers based on an alien entity that you don't fully understand. Just flinging in a wee bit of bestiality with Aerith and Red 13, and just
Oh,
just
that was yeah, because that's what he's
bru-
trying to do. That is
yeah,
what Hojo is trying to do. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
just
mate.
just brush over that,
At
shall we?
least in Remake, they changed it to G type. Was it G type?
S type and G type.
S
So
type and
yeah,
G type. Yeah, they at least
the
changed that. Thank God.
so yeah, the idea was that they would actually create multiple children so they could experiment on multiple kids rather than one kid that had a long lifespan.
I mean, look at Picture in the Past as well. That complete disregard for human life in general. Just like, oh yeah, go check this place out. If you come back, good stuff. If not, eh.
But that's effectively, they've lifted that one right out the Nazi playbook
Yeah,
of like humans are numbers,
yeah, literally.
and we're going to feed this person pill A and this person pill B, and
Let's see
whoever
what happens.
survives will
Yeah,
just make a note of that. You know,
it is.
just
And yeah, and when you think about it, these things were in that original game, but it comes down to, I think, it's the same sort of thing as why South Park gets away with as much as it does. Because when you watch South Park, it's kids saying this outrageous stuff, so you don't attach that much seriousness to it. And looking back at Final Fantasy VII, it's presented in a way that, you know, it's colourful, it's bright, all this stuff's going on. You've got these little, like you say, these little Lego characters. So you don't, and granted, we were all a lot younger then as well. So you don't necessarily connect to everything that's going on. But now that we've got this game where it's going to be, like, it's already taken that much grittier, much more realistic approach to things. As this game goes on and more information comes out and more events happen, it's going to get grim.
Yeah, and part of the beauty as well is that it it gives you a kind of selection of information and allows you to come to your own conclusions about it. It doesn't ram things down your throat or
Yes.
kind of spoon feed you the stuff. It's and I mean a good example is um like the situation with Barrett and how Barrett is viewed um as this father figure.
Yep.
And yeah, there's he's how he behaves around Marlene is he is a positive role model for that. He makes her feel special. He's teaching her the right ways.
Yep.
He's also a father figure to Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and
Yep.
he physically shows it with Tifa at the beginning of chapter 13. But nobody really wants to talk about the fact that he's an active terrorist
Yep.
and
He's killed a lot of people.
and leaves his daughter with
Strangers.
Tifa to go off and murder people.
Yep.
That's personally, I wouldn't really like a father figure like that.
Nope.
So
it's that framing as well. I think this is going to become a big theme as well. Like, not, that not very much is black and white. Grey areas are definitely going to come into it in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously you've got Hojo, who's horrible. There's no grey areas there. He's just a bad man. But when it comes, he's naughty. But when it comes to like Barrett, kind of accept it because you know what he's shooting for. But at the same time, it is still wrong. You know what I mean? Innocent people are suffering because of what he's done.
Yeah.
It's...
And it eventually gets addressed.
Yes.
Was the end of Final Fantasy VII where Kachi kind of just loses the plot, or Reeve loses the plot, and is just like, listen, like, you were the bad guys.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong.
No.
Obviously the cause and the greater good, you can understand it because it's presented to you as these are the heroes.
You're doing the right thing. Yeah, big picture.
And it's the same thing. You look at the.
This is the thing, though. I think you'd struggle to find any person who didn't think they were doing the right thing at the point that they were doing it. Like, I'll guarantee that German guy, I don't even want to say his name, but he probably thought he was doing the right thing. And that's why he was so convicted in what he was doing. But he was wrong.
Yeah, and that's when we kind of look at the villains that Square Enix have written, the really successful villains, your Sephiroths, your Ardens, your Emmett Silks. These guys are the heroes of their own story.
Yes.
And if you look at the story from their perspective, they believe they're the hero.
100%, yeah.
So it then becomes this sort of broader question of
what is?
Are we actually doing the right thing here?
What is right?
But at no point does Final Fantasy say one way or the other that definitively you are the good guys or you are the bad guys. It's kind of left open to your interpretation.
Yep.
I think the older you get, the more you begin to question these things.
Yeah, definitely.
Which kind of adds layer upon layer upon layer to the stories, and there's an amazing beauty to that. I can't remember what the original question was.
Oh, it was the prediction one, the Aerith one. Oh, we've gone way off track from the Aerith question. But this is good. This is how it happens. Yeah. We're at 2 hours and 13 minutes. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, there's. I think there's a lot, that we can touch on and discuss about Remake, and there's so much still to be told.
Oh, so much, yeah.
That I'm massively excited. I really want to see what they do with the next part, so that we can all sit down and process it and then discuss it and break it down and have these conversations for 18
another.
months, 2 years
Well, this is
afterwards.
it. We're looking. I mean, if they go the route that you're saying with 4 games, which if they do everything to the scale that they did Midgar and they don't change anything, it's probably going to be 4 or 5, guaranteed. Like they're not getting it done in 3. It's not going to happen if
No,
they stick to everything. We're looking at like the next 8 years, 10 years of Final Fantasy VII. I mean,
yeah.
yes, you know
Which
what I mean.
is, I literally could not have asked for anything else. It's not even as if you know randomly like my favorite author is writing a new series, or a new Final Fantasy series. Is specifically the
The one.
game that I loved that,
Yep.
that this is happening with, and for me, it's just incredible. But hey ho,
It's going to be a
um,
journey. It is going to be a journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we get going forwards because, like you say, it is completely wide open. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the journey of what we're going to see in the future and like who's right, who's wrong. Because we're all making these predictions. None of us have got a clue. You've probably got one of the more informed opinions, if I'm being completely honest with you, with the mythology and everything. This I just watch stuff and go, oh yeah, that's going to happen next. That's kind of how I go about
yeah,
things.
this
Oh.
opinion changes from week to week. Yeah,
Pretty much, pretty much, pretty much. No, I like working in possibilities because there, I think it's one of the only ways you can do it with Remake because there are, at this point, that many different possibilities. And once we get to the end of part 2, we'll have a more concrete view of what's going on in the world, like what state the world's in, what the motives of certain characters are, because we still don't really know what Sephiroth. I mean, we can assume what Sephiroth's trying to do in the grand picture. Like part 1, he just wanted to get free, and we facilitated that. We don't know what he's shooting for. We can, like I say, we can assume it's the same as AC, but beyond that, no idea. So,
yeah,
I think once this point after part 2, we'll know a lot more and we'll be able to be a bit more educated and a bit more confident in theories. But at this point, it's like, shit, man, what's going on?
well, again, it's the uncertainty that
Yep,
keeps us
keeps
keeps
the
us
hype
craving
going.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, 100% definitely keeps us craving more. So that was the 7 questions. How was it for you?
it was amazing. I've had a wonderful time. Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to have to, like you were saying, with like the next part of the game, and we all get to talk about it and everything again. I'm going to have to come up with 7 fresh questions for after part 2 comes out because I can't ask the same questions again, can I? I have to figure something out.
Well, yeah, I suppose you could and just see if our answers have changed.
Oh, maybe. The Big 7 remake. Just put the same videos up and just chop them around a bit. Yeah, no, I can't. I don't think I'd get away with that. I think the fan base would cancel me quite quickly. So that is, like I say, the end of the questions. Before we finish up today, what have you got going on in the pipeline at the minute? So we're talking about the Greek myths book that you've got going on, but you've also got other stuff going on. You make your videos and stuff like that. What kind of projects do you want to kind of direct people's eyes to at the moment?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned there, the big thing for me is the Kickstarter campaign for Greek myths
Yeah.
that inspired Final Fantasy VII. Though that only runs until the 5th of October. So if anyone is interested in getting some exclusive goodies,
So by the time this comes out, you'll have 2 weeks.
okay,
2 weeks, people.
amazing.
2 weeks.
Amazing. So that, yeah, that the link to that can just be found on my Twitter or social media. My Twitter again is
Description as
at
well.
FFVII novels, or just sort of go into Kickstarter and search for Greek myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII. As I said, there's a lot of unique items in there. There'll be a
Yes.
kind of Kickstarter only edition. Which I'm really excited about. I'm massively grateful that the Norse myths book has been such a success. So effectively, it's more of the same. I'm
Yes.
expecting.
That's all good.
Um,
If it's more of the same, it's going to be good.
yeah. So as I mentioned, the Norse myths book is available on Amazon. So it's just Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII. I'm still working on my remake compilation lore and Easter
Yes.
eggs video series. So same thing, you can find links to those on my social media or They're on YouTube on KuboCon's channel. So KuboCon actually commissioned this series.
Yes.
So it's if you go to the KuboCon channel, you'll find them there. But links to everything I've done, like I've got quite a few Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII novels. They're all free to download. The links to those are on Patreon, which is patreon.com/MJ Gallagher. And the Nibelheim Instant again actually has an audiobook version read by Liam Mulvey, who's Libertus in Final Fantasy 15. He is, that can be listened to on YouTube as well from KupoCon. And I'm actually Liam and I are currently working on an audiobook for Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, so that'll be getting released in 6 to 8 weeks' time, we hope.
Love that.
And I think that's all I'm doing just now.
I don't know if I've got anything else coming on.
But that's my secret. I'm
trying to work out who's the busiest at the minute. You are, Ray. Like it's pretty tough figuring this out. Which one's busier? Shit. I need to step my game up.
But do you know what? That's been my secret for years. That I always have 3 or 4 projects running at the same time. Yeah. So if you get bored with one, you can procrastinate by working on the other.
Yes, I am definitely a fan of that. Like, yeah, I've been there a few times. Like, oh, this script's doing me head, and I'm going to go and write something else.
Yeah, I think that's everything. I was working on an episode intermission lore series as well. The first 3 episodes of that are actually on my YouTube channel. But I've had to put that aside for now to kind of focus on the other things. But yeah, I've always got stuff. Just every now and again, just throw out mythology and Final Fantasy articles. So
the little bite-sized lore, but yeah.
I stick the bite-sized ones.
Do the YouTube Shorts thing.
I might look into it because they seem to be quite successful.
Just record. You can literally just record it on your phone and upload it like that to YouTube.
Oh, really?
Literally just record it like that and upload straight. It's got to be under a minute, and you have to do it from your phone. You can do it from PC, but you have to piss about and make it so that it's laid out as if it was on a phone. And then when you upload it to YouTube, you have to put #shorts in the title. But if you do it from your phone, you just upload it via the. Have you got the YouTube Studio app on your phone?
Yeah.
Do it through that.
Well, okay.
It's got to be under a minute.
I'll maybe look at doing that because that's quite an interesting thing. Like I said, they've been pretty successful on social media. But all of the wee bite-sized ones, there's longer versions of them on my Patreon account, which again, most of these are just free to access anyway. So I just happen to host them on Patreon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's again, I'm just obsessed. So I like to throw these things out.
I love it. And like I say, all of the links, they'll be hovering under you right now on the screen. They will have been all episode, but they'll all be in the description. So if you want to catch up with Mo and check out any of his work, of which there is a lot, and it's really good, check out the description. All the links are going to be there.
I appreciate it. And
sorry.
Always very receptive to anyone who wants to reach out on Twitter or social media. Just drop me a message. I'm always keen to chat.
Say hi. That's it, and that's the beauty of it. Like you were saying earlier, that connection with people that are into the same thing that you're into. Because growing up when we did, because we're roughly the same age, that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah,
there was maybe 2 or 3 people, like you were saying, in your year at school that might be into it. Like I was lucky; I had 2 or 3 of my closest mates in school who were all into JRPGs and things like that. So we'd kind of pick games up and loan them to each other once we all kind of got into it. But it's so easy to make these connections with people now. So just reach out and say hi.
Absolutely.
Oh no, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is definitely not going to be the last time we do it. But thank you very much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. And check out the other episodes of the Big 7. They're all going to be in a playlist. There's so many amazing people, so please do check them all out. But from me, that's going to be the end of it. And
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been an amazing chat. So yeah, I'll be back.
Love it. We'll get the shades on you and everything for that one. No, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. No. And have a great day, everybody. Take care.